So by this time it's 6.
It is. I call this meeting to order of the West Jordan City Council. All council members are present with us tonight. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. It's going to be led by Josue Ramos from Troop 1223. So Josue, would you come up and lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
Thank you, Jose. We have two presentations this evening. We're going to start with one that I'm going to let Scott Langford just handle it.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. We'd like to recognize Commissioner Josh Sikoski. He's one of our planning commissioners that has served over the last 2 years. Unfortunately, Commissioner Sikoski was not able to be here tonight, but we have prepared a plaque. I also want to just mention that during his 2-year term, he represented the Planning Commission on our Design Review Committee, and he also served this past year as Vice Chair of the Planning Commission. So land use decisions are sometimes challenging, and Josh provided some great insight, and he'll be missed, and we just wanted to thank him for that officially. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And we know his work schedule was causing him to not be able to come tonight. So if you can pass that on to him, we'd appreciate it.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move to our communications and start with city manager reports.
At this point, we're looking forward to Friday's strategic planning meeting. We are designing the room to allow more face-to-face communication between council members, with the public having a row. The press and the public will have a back row that they can use to sit and write on if they want, and there will also be seating to the north where they can just sit and will be able to come and go as they want. So everything looks like it will be starting around 7:45 a.m. and running through 5 p.m. We'll probably have the agenda out well, it's out. It's already out. Thank you, and that will be the message for tonight.
Thank you. Paul?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I don't have anything tonight.
Okay, thank you. Scott, we'll start with you.
Nothing else. Thanks, Mayor.
Ryan?
Just one item, Mayor. We've confirmed with Comcast for Comcast Cares Days. That'll take place April 21st, and more information to follow. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill?
Nothing tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Justin?
Thank you, Mayor. I have two items. The first item, next Saturday, the city will be hosting an e-waste shred event from 10 to noon in the City Hall parking lot for residential residences to be able to bring their e-waste and any personal documents they might have to be able to get those shredded and disposed of properly. The second item, we're expecting another snowstorm tomorrow, and so we kindly ask for people to avoid parking in the street during snowstorms. It makes it difficult for us to be able to plow those roads. That's all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Chief Peterson.
Nothing at this time, thanks.
Chief Diamond.
The only thing, Mayor, is just a short report back on our Facebook page. In the last 2 weeks, we've apprehended a couple of suspects due to information that led to good police work as well, but information that we gained from that website or from the Facebook page to their capture. One of them was a first-degree felony burglary. So thank you to the public for helping us out on that. We will continue to look forward to putting out information on that Facebook page to help with the safety of the community.
Thank you. We'll now move to council reports and start with Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to recognize all the scouts that are here tonight. Looks like it's a full house, and thank you for coming, and thank you to Josue for leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Also, just wanted to let Public Works know thank you for their efforts on the snow removal this last storm. I haven't received any complaints, but by the time I went out, everything was clear. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually did receive some complaints, so not the fault of the Public Works Department, thankfully. This is more about the parking on the street. So I'll echo what Mr. Stoker said about please don't park on the street during snowstorms. Plows can't get by, and sometimes people can't get in and out of their driveways because the plow can't get by. It's a problem. I would like to just encourage, I don't know if I want to say direct staff, but encourage the police department to keep an eye out for those. I know there's probably 8,000 cars that you'd have to ticket if you were going to get them all, but I've got some angry people who are really, really interested in having that more heavily enforced, shall we say. I'll leave it to your discretion, Chief, but just passing that along. Thanks.
Councilmember Whitelock.
I'm not good at these reports because I think they're just a personal thing. But the only thing I want to share is that I've had the opportunity to meet with many of our legislators, and I'm happy that they're willing to work with us, and I look forward to the rest of the session to collaborate with them for what's best for our city.
Thank you. Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. I, too, want to commend our Public Works for the wonderful job they do in snow removal. I lived in West Jordan both as a child and now as an adult for almost 20 years. And about 5 years ago, you couldn't say that about snow removal in West Jordan. We get reports from our city manager whenever the snow removal is out, and they tell us of the hours they put in. So let the Public Works and all those know that are out there that they're doing a great job. And while it's not perfect, it's a lot better than it was 5 years ago. So thank you.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to clarify with Brian, I heard that the Comcast Day was going to be on the 14th. Is it actually the 21st then?
It is the 21st.
Okay, I will correct my calendar. Thank you. And everybody who's in the audience and listening abroad, schedule that day, Comcast Cares Day. That's the day when we go out and serve and clean up West Jordan. And the more volunteer hours we get, the more money Comcast donates to West Jordan. So it's a win-win situation for all of us. Also, Scouts, I'd like to welcome you here. There are several Scouts here. And some of you guys, if you want to use that media room over there, you're welcome to go in that room and give you a room, stand-up room inside of there as well. Also, coming up February 4th is Scout Sunday. So those of you who celebrate Scouting, celebrate Scout Sunday, because the birthday of the Boy Scouts is on February 8th of 1914. So that's why that's the Scout Day. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, as we've been talking about snow removal, I'm not sure some of the new council members have heard, but in a fleet board meeting that we held not too long ago, we discussed some options for potentially adding GPS trackers to our snowplows and what it would take to make that information visible to the public so that people can see when snowplows have come and where they haven't. I think oftentimes people think that the plows haven't been out there when they have, so this will be very, very helpful. It's something that the Fleet Board plans to bring to the council when it comes time for conversation a little bit further down the road, but just wanted to give you a sneak peek that that's coming, something that they're working on. Item number 2, Councilmember Burton and I were able to meet this last week with the Airport Advisory Board. They are planning to come to the council on I want to say the second meeting that we have in February to give council an update. This is a relatively new committee. As you know, last year, West Jordan obtained a seat on Salt Lake City Airport Board, and that's currently, that seat's currently filled by it's typically filled by the mayor. With that, there is an advisory board to help provide information to the mayor so he can make the best use of the resources with the Salt Lake Airport Authority. We have the advisory committee to advise him on the airport board. With that, the priorities that they are starting to follow are the priorities that were set by a prior council. So if we want to change them, we do have the opportunity. So I just wanted to let you know what those priorities were. Top of the list is working to secure the use of the soccer fields. As you know, right now Salt Lake City owns the soccer fields that are at the south end of the runway. We're under contract October 31st, 2025. By contract, they have to be returned to an unplowed field, which means all the grass goes, the irrigation goes, the sidewalk goes. So number one priority is working with Salt Lake City and the FAA and the airport to try to protect those fields going forward beyond that 2025 date. We're also working to try to make it easier for instrument traffic to land at our airport. Right now it's very difficult. They have to wait for Salt Lake International first, which makes it difficult for corporate jets to use our airport. And then third priority is working towards a potential tower to improve aircraft safety. Those are the 3 big priorities that they're working towards. Just something to think about if we'd like to see a change made. Have any thoughts in mind, but they'll be coming to present the second meeting in February. That's all I have this week. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm glad we have so many scouts here tonight because I want to try to just give you a little bit of instruction. As you may or may not know, the Scouts, our form of government was voted on in the election in November to change in January of 2020. Right now, we are in what's called a council manager form of government, and it'll change to a council mayor form of government in 2020. So there's some things that are going to change, but I wanted to let you know how we operate right now under our current form of government. So I'm going to read a few things here so that you have a good understanding about what we do now and how we operate now. So for mayoral duties, no administrative executive duties. The mayor shall have no administrative or executive powers or duties. The mayor may provide citizens with names and phone numbers or email addresses into specific departments of city government or assistance with citizen questions. But the mayor may not direct the city staff as to the solution or action responding to any such concern. Any issue raised by citizens or the city council concerning the level of appropriateness of city responses or services shall be discussed with the city manager and not directly with any subordinate employee. Now, the functions of the city council as we are currently working. The duties. As the legislative branch of the city government, the city council passes ordinances, appropriates funds, establishes policy, and performs such other duties and responsibilities as are required or permitted by law. The city council may review the city manager's accomplishments of the city council's directives expressed to the city manager in the form of ordinances and written resolutions. For legislative acts, the city council's will is expressed by ordinances, resolution, declaration, budget approval, and other written statements of policy and concern. In every case, the will of the city council shall be expressed by a majority vote of the city council. No statement or act of any individual member of the governing body shall be viewed as the will of the city council. Now, the city manager's responsibility to the city council. As the executive branch of the city government, the city manager shall manage all executive and administrative powers and activities of the city and will be responsible to the city council to see that these powers and activities are consistent with and fulfill the city council's policies as expressed in ordinances and resolutions adopted by the city council. The responsibility to execute the policy of the city council lies with the city manager. So over the next 2 years, our legal department and the city manager are going to work together because we have to now rewrite several codes and ordinances as it pertains to changing our form of government, which will take effect in January of 2020. So thank you for putting up with that for just a minute. We're now going to move to citizen comments, but I wanted to just read, not everybody out there that has an agenda tonight probably can read along with me, because I don't think it's been a long time since I've ever heard this read in council meeting, but I wanted to read it so that, and again, we have a lot of scouts out there that need to understand too, they have an opportunity to come up and take 3 minutes and talk about whatever it is they want to talk about as well. So it's a great opportunity for citizens to come up and address city council. But let me read this. Citizens are permitted to address the council concerning any matter over which the council has jurisdiction, including comments concerning an item on the agenda. The council will allow 3 minutes to do so during this period. Written comments may be submitted if a citizen does not wish to speak. Any comments needing or requesting follow-up will be assigned to staff for further action as appropriate after the meeting. Please provide contact information on the sign-up sheet and state your name and phone number when speaking to the council so later follow-up can take place. Persons who exceed the time or are otherwise disorderly may be expelled by the council upon a 2/3 majority vote as provided by Utah Code Annotated 10-3-608. Excuse me. The council requires that citizens help maintain the decorum of the meeting by not applauding or booing, turning off electronic devices, not engaging in verbal attacks against others, or being disrespectful during the proceedings of the meeting. So that's just something that probably, even though people get an agenda every time they come, that's one of those things that's fine print that they don't read every time. So I wanted to just take a minute to read that, especially since we have so many scouts with us today. So with that, we're going to open up citizens' comments, and I have some that have signed up, so we'll start with those. And just remember, you have 3 minutes, and the first one to sign up is Brad Nelson. So, Brad.
Good evening. My name is Brad Nelson, and I'm a resident of the Ivory Home subdivision, Summer Glen Heights. And I represent a number of families and individuals that live in that area, and I'm representing them, and my wife is also here, and she has a brief letter from one of the residents she'd like to share for this time. So we are addressing the rezoning proposal by Perry Homes to rezone the area north of our subdivision to medium, from low density to medium density, and we have some concerns about that. The residents are concerned that as we change from low density to medium density, that's going to bring more starter homes into the area. The area is already inundated with apartment complexes that are planned or being built in smaller homes. We attended the last commission meeting, and one of the points was made that we continue to build smaller homes. That's the residents you get, and they soon leave for a nicer, more permanent home, and that's what we've seen in Sienna Vista. A lot of those homes have turned into rental properties. My wife and I built our final home in Summer Glen Heights. It's a bigger home with a larger lot on purpose. And we liked the neighborhood the way it was laid out. Now we're becoming disappointed a little bit because we see the surrounding area is not staying consistent with that. We're also concerned about the increased traffic. All of the roads in and out of our neighborhood are going to be connected to this new subdivision, and the higher density homes need more traffic. And there's a number of comments from residents about the population of the schools, traffic patterns there as well. And certainly one of our biggest concerns is where our home sits and others is making sure that whatever is put in that subdivision is adequately looked at for drainage. We're sitting right next to what's supposed to be a proposed detention pond, and I don't have a real comfortable feeling that my yard is going to become an extension of that detention pond. So we would ask you to take a look at what's proposed and ask the question, why should we change from a low density to medium density? What's wrong with building nicer homes, bigger yards, rather than having Harriman and South Jordan be the only place people can go find those kind of homes? Again, I would like to turn some time over to my wife to share this letter from a longer-term resident, if that's okay.
Thank you. Does she get another 3 minutes there?
I don't think we need that, but.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Can we?
Keep going.
Okay.
Thank you. This is a letter from Jenny Tate, who also resides in the Highlands area of Summer Glen Heights. She writes, a few years ago we made a decision to buy our forever home. We have lived in West Jordan for 12 years and ultimately decided to stay near our friends. We built a home in Summer Glen Heights in the Highlands. Since we have been here, we have watched many of our friends who have also been looking for their forever homes move away from West Jordan. They had a hard time finding a home that they felt that fit their older and larger families here in West Jordan. Sadly, many of our friends have left for South Jordan and Harriman because they could find larger homes with larger yards and new schools. It feels as if West Jordan City does not want those stable long-term families moving here. Why? There's construction going on all around us, and it's all apartments or starter homes. Nothing for more established families. The schools are very crowded, especially Copper Hills School, but according to the Jordan District, the student population is declining. Yet we have high and medium density going in all around us. There is an obvious lack of communication between the city and the school district. These things make people move to other cities. We are tired of watching great, stable, established families leave West Jordan. Do we want to make West Jordan a place for people to have their forever homes, or do we want it to be a place to go until they can afford to go someplace nicer? Thank you.
Thank you. Colette Litchard.
Thank you, Mayor and Council members. I want to express my concern over business item 6B regarding the cost of the contract between the city and David Brickey. First, I want to make it clear my concern is not with Mr. Brickey's personal or professional character. In the time I've been a West Jordan citizen and from what I've witnessed of Mr. Brickey as both city attorney and interim city manager, I believe he has fulfilled his duties with fidelity and publicly recognize and thank him for his service to the city of West Jordan. So thank you. My concern is the monetary compensation amount within the contract. I did some preliminary research into the averages, both nationwide and statewide, of city managers' base salaries. The result led me to have great concern that the contract in question on today's agenda has an annual base salary that is far above what it should be to be considered fiscally responsible. I would like the council to take more time to do further research into what is an appropriate salary for a municipal officer and not make the mistake of trying to have the salary comparable to a private sector for-profit business executive or a private practice attorney. Public service salaries are usually lower than the private sector because the public servants have a fiscal, moral, and ethical duty to their citizens to keep the cost of running a city as low as possible. I think this contract shows a blatant disregard for the fiduciary duty that the council has to the citizens of West Jordan and ask that you vote no on this contract as it is written. I respectfully ask Mr. Brickey to decline the current offer as it stands and do some deep soul searching into whether he is here for a high salary or if he is here to serve West Jordan. If a public servant, which this position is, has more concern with obtaining the highest possible salary than serving the public, who is in essence their employer, then maybe that candidate is not the best choice and should certainly not the best value for the money or the city as a whole. Greed in government is and always should be deplorable to every citizen, especially those sitting up there on the dais. Any citizen should be remiss in their duty to stay silent on the issue, which is why I again request that each and every one of you on the council vote no on business item 6B as it stands. I think more of a discussion needs to be had before the final decision is made. And since I have just a few seconds, I also want to express that I am also against item 9B of the rezoning of higher density. My husband and I also moved here because of the proximity to open spaces, and I think it would be wrong to put higher density housing in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Alexandre Fremo.
Council. All of you Boy Scouts, I know you're thankful for your leaders, you're thankful for Mom and Dad. So for a couple of seconds, let's all bow our heads and just bow our heads and count our blessings. Okay, thank you. I am, I'm very, very upset with Whitelock. She went ahead and she put a letter in the editorial page, and I believe in the truth, okay? She put in here in the January issue, I was given the opportunity to have an ad in the Tribune and Deseret News as an in-kind donation. Hey folks, an in-kind donation means the Tribune paid for that ad for $14,000. Hey Whitelock, it's a lie. You did not have an in-kind ad in the Tribune. It's a lie. Because here in your attachment, you donated $5,000 November 12th to the Utah Media Group for the ad. And also, you go ahead and I have documents, this is black and white. I want the truth, Whitelock. Anyway, here you go in the council member session here on November 21st. You have in here, Whitelock says she wishes to thank the residents for the vote. Then she says here, then you say, the Salt Lake Board of Directors who provided a great deal of assistance to her, and also the Utah Media Group. She explained that they had donated an ad, which she used as a thank you. Number one, we are in West Jordan. We're not in Salt Lake City. We are in West Jordan. You should have taken out a thank you note to the citizens of West Jordan for $400 to say, thank you, West Jordan citizens. But I don't like lies. I don't like lies. You and I are having a battle on the editorials in the thing. And I want the truth. How can you in the editorials say that it was the Tribune that did an in-kind ad, and then I have documentation that's not true? I want the truth. Whitelock, thank you.
Beth Holbrook.
Thank you. Really quickly, I'm here on behalf of Waste Management, so if I could get 5, that would be great. Thank you so much. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. Thank you for allowing me to have the opportunity to speak with you this evening. My name is Beth Holbrook, and I'm with Waste Management. I'm the Waste Management representative for West Jordan. We are here tonight to talk to you about the proposed action to approve a new solid waste collection and disposal contract. I say we because although I'm at the podium tonight for Waste Management also has our drivers, our route managers, and other employees. As you may or may not know, our office is located here in West Jordan on 4000 West. We have been here since 1993. Each day we have over 100 employees that show up for work in West Jordan, and at least 35% of those employees are West Jordan residents. Because of this, West Jordan is especially important to us. We have our hauling site and our recycling facility here, where we process and sell our recyclables, and we don't use a third party. In addition, we have a compressed natural gas fueling station with public access for the community right here as well at our same location. We are proud to operate our business in West Jordan. We are invested in your city. We are a community partner, and most of all, we are the local trash company. So you can imagine our disappointment when we found out that the city staff recommended someone else for your solid waste services. We certainly respect the staff's recommendation. However, we want to share the reasons we object to this recommendation. Number one, the highest weighted area of the RFP scoring sheet was price, and Waste Management is the lowest bidder. Choosing us will save the city nearly $54,000 a year over the life of the contract. That's a savings of $430,000. Number two, the current service provider scored higher than Waste Management in the service methodology section, yet in your RFP, you stated verbatim, and I quote, "The city has struggled to respond to residents' concerns about streets being missed, trucks being late for pickup, or missed cans for various reasons," unquote. We're completely confused by this rating. The solution provided to message the city within 5 minutes does not resolve the service issues as outlined in the RFP. We feel what the city is asking for in the RFP is a company that provides exceptional service, not exceptional notification of poor service. Our residential operations service satisfaction is 99% in the state of Utah. You don't have to take our word for it. You are welcome to call any of the cities we service. Waste Management is more than up to the task to take over the solid waste collection in West Jordan. We have a world-class safety culture. Every one of our drivers are sent to our Florida training facility for 2 weeks, where they receive extensive classroom, safety simulation, and in-cab training. Our West Jordan management staff has over 75 years of combined experience, so we will work very hard with the city to ensure a smooth and successful transition. I see some new faces on the council, so you may not realize that this is the second time we've answered the RFP in recent months. The first time, we were rated highly by the evaluation committee and significantly outscored the current provider in 4 out of 5 areas, price being the only area we did not win. Had our proposal been fully considered then, there is no question we would have come out as the clear winner. Now I stand before you as the low bidder, and we are still not being recommended by staff. When making a decision that affects the health and safety of your constituents, you want to make sure you've made the right choice. Waste Management is the right choice. I understand how important and how difficult these decisions can be, and I know what a lasting impact they have on the community. As a seated councilwoman, I know firsthand how difficult, but sometimes we make decisions that can be different than what's presented. I'm asking the council to have the courage to vote no, to approve the contract with Ace Recycling and Disposal, and make a motion to award the contract to Waste Management. This is a show of our support. And I just want to say thank you very much.
Thank you. Since we have 3 public hearings, and you're here to speak on any of those, you'll have an opportunity at that point in time. So with that, are there any others that wish to speak during the citizens' comments at this time? Please come forward, state your name and contact information, please.
My name is Scott Bell, spelled S-C-O-T-T. Bell as in ringing a bell, B-E-L-L. My number is 801-573-8195. Mr. Mayor, council persons, thank you for allowing me to speak. I am here basically just to make a request, requesting that West Jordan consider building a liquor store in West Jordan. The DABC has determined that the appropriate density of liquor stores is about 1 in 48,000 Utahns, and sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. 1 in 48,000 Utahns, and I think that represents a total of about 68 stores in Utah. There are only 41 full state liquor stores and about 111 package stores, smaller package stores in Utah. We have a liquor store on Sandy, right on our border. We have another liquor store in Taylorsville, right on our border. And I think it would behoove our residents here in West Jordan to have a liquor store in West Jordan. The city will actually get 0.5% of the general sales of the revenue, general sales, and the county gets an additional 1/8 of a percent, or 0.125% of the general sales. So both the county and the state could benefit, or sorry, the county and the city of West Jordan could benefit if we have a West Jordan liquor store. That's all I have. I just set that out for your consideration. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to City Council? Please come forward and state your name and your phone number if you can do that.
My name is Xander. And I just wanted to say thank you to all the firemen and the policemen, because one time I thought it was really cool, because when I was riding around on my skateboard, this police officer, he drove by and he got out and he said, do you, so he's like, what kind of skateboard is that? And I just talked to him a little bit about it. And then he opened the back door of his truck and he said, you can go ahead and pick a skateboard. And it was really cool because he gave me a skateboard. And because he said that when he was little, he sold skateboards and he loved to skateboard. So I thought that was really cool. And I just wanted to say thank you to all the firemen and police.
Thank you.
Mayor, can I just ask real quick, how old are you? Can I ask that the record strike his phone number, protect that until his parents allow that release?
Steve Jones, 3234 West, 6920 South here in West Jordan. Just a couple of quick thoughts that came to mind as some comments were being made. And then in talking earlier with Councilmember Burton, about our garbage collection, our waste management. One of the things that comes to my mind is and one thing that hasn't been really said is, and I've been a resident for well over 30 years, I've had good service at my house. I got no complaints whatsoever. And I would leave it up to our city to make sure that we are provided with the best possible service. One of the things that I know in the world that we live in, sometimes it's hard to stand back and look and see. Right now it's proverbial one in the bush versus one in the hand. Right now, for me, I get good service. So as long as my prices are not going up and I'm not throwing something under the barrel, the thing that causes me concern is I look at 7 years as being a long time. And so if I get a changeover and all of a sudden I get lousy service, I'm stuck with it for 7 years. So just a food for thought. And then the last thing I'd like to comment on is while I greatly appreciate Interim City Manager David Brickey, I think he's an awesome individual, and I think the city would be great to have him. But like some comments made, I'm probably okay with the salary. It's the executive perks that I sometimes have and this goes even back to when Mark was having his contract reviewed. I think some of those perks are a little bit out of line myself for what's industry-wide, and this one didn't cause me near as much heartache because it's not a one-year contract, it's a 2-year contract. And the city is kind of in a precarious position, I think, because we are getting ready to change our form of government. But just a word of thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to council tonight? Seeing none, then we'll move on. Oh, Councilmember McConaughey, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could just exercise a little personal privilege. I know typically during council or during citizen comments, this is our time to sit back and listen to what folks have to say, so we don't always respond. But with the comment that Mr. Bell brought up, I thought it would be appropriate to just make a quick comment about the process for determining a liquor store. We've worked with the DABC before as they've looked at potential sites, but it's actually the DABC that makes the determination as to where the site goes and not the city. I could talk about that a little bit further, but obviously it's not on the agenda. But we do have Mr. Langford here with development, and he could, if you have further questions, he can get with you if you want to give him your contact information for further information on that. I just want to make sure if there was a direct question that we could answer, we did. So thank you, Mayor.
Business item 6B, discussion and possible action regarding Resolution 18-08, authorizing the mayor to execute a contract with David R. Bricky. Somebody in the council like to address this one? Questions from council? This says business item 6B. I am looking at Melanie's notes here. Did we skip over 6A? Yes. Okay, my apologies. Business item 7. Leanne, where have you been? Okay. 6A, business discussion and possible action regarding Resolution 18-07, confirming the appointment of David R. Bricky as city manager. Council. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve Resolution 1807, appointing Mr. David Bricky as city manager for the city of West Jordan.
Councilmember Burton, excuse me, Councilmember Whitelock.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Whitelock.
Well,
your name.
I'm going to ask Mr. Bricky, should my comments come now or next? My comments, shall they come now or in the next item? Okay, I'm just going to put it this way. I want to make it clear that I'm in support of naming David Bricky as our city manager. When we get to the next agenda item, I'll speak again.
Seeing no more other comments, let's vote.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Mayor Riding?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob?
Enthusiastically, yes.
Councilmember McConaughey?
Matching that enthusiasm, aye.
Councilmember Whitelock?
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
I'll be the third enthusiastically yes.
And enthusiastically, it passed 7-0.
Okay. Discussion and possible action regarding Resolution 18-08, authorizing the mayor to execute a contract with David R. Bricky. Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. I would first like to say I am very excited to have David Bricky as our city manager, and my next comments are not towards David Bricky as the city manager. It is towards the contract of the city manager, regardless of who it is. So this contract is a 2-year contract that we're putting forth, and as has been mentioned, it's a very nice contract, and we're taking good care of our city manager, which I think is appropriate. The concern I have is included in this contract is a severance pay, a 6-month severance pay. In my mind, the severance pay is good when they need to find a way to locate employment after they've lost their employment. For those that didn't know that they were going to be losing their job and they end up losing it, I think that's totally appropriate. In this case, however, we know that this contract is for 2 years. We know that job is going to evaporate and go away in 2 years. And we also know that that person can start now preparing for his next employment at that point. And we also know that the city would be very thrilled to have that individual serving and working in another position other than city manager after that time is over. So for all those, in my mind, that 6 month is 1/4 of the amount he spent in that job position. So I am in favor of the contract. If we can remove that 6-month severance pay, if we do that, I would vote yes on that contract.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. And I know it's come up quite often because we seem to have go through city managers frequently. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. However, the 6-month contract, or I'm sorry, the 6-month severance is actually part of state code, and I had asked Melanie to give me a copy of this, so I'm just going to read it. And this is from under the form of government that you all heard the mayor explain, the form of government that we're in now, which is the council manager form of government. That has been discontinued by the state of Utah. It was removed from state code in 2008. And so we have to go to a 1977 law book to find how this form works. So in that law book, in Title 10, Chapter 3, Section 1225, Manager Removal from Office, it reads, "The municipal council may at its pleasure by majority vote remove the manager, except in the case of removal for proven malfeasance in office, the council shall," and that's an important word in legalese, "cause the manager upon his removal to be paid any unpaid balance of his salary due to the date of his removal, together with his salary at the same rate for the next 6 calendar months following the date of his removal." So I don't know that we have an ability to remove a 6-month severance if we terminate a contract for a city manager, because it's indicated in state law that we shall cause the manager upon his removal to be paid his remaining contract and 6 months. And I don't expect that to happen, but by the same token, Mr. Bricky is signing, hopefully, a 2-year contract on a position that will be gone in 2 years. So it's a big jump for any employee who may want to continue employment, but the job title city manager goes away at noon on January 6, 2020. That will no longer be a position in this city. Thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. The severance isn't so much of a sticking point for me. As I'm looking to the next 2 years and everything that has to happen, the change in form of government is significant. And as I share these thoughts, none of my thoughts are directed at you personally, Mayor. I mean, you've been in the seat for 2 meetings now, so
22 days.
22 days, just over 3 weeks. So none of this has to do with you. And also with Mr. Bricky, this does not speak to his character. I'm just speaking hypothetically, and this is why I'm okay with having the severance. If you have a job and you know that that job's going to evaporate at a set point in time, I would like to make sure we do what we can to keep his attention focused where it needs to be, and that's serving the entire council. Towards the end, I could imagine a scenario where, well, I'll skip with the hypotheticals. I want him to be as focused on the job as possible through the end of the term. I don't want to come up on the end of the term and have him thinking about, okay, well, what do I do next? Where do I go? I want him totally focused on serving the council, and not one particular person on the council, one council member or even the mayor. Under our form of government, mayor, as you read, or excuse me, as the mayor read, under our form of government, the mayor is just another member of the council. And the city manager serves the majority of the council. I think having that safety net in there helps when it's necessary for the city manager to exert a little bit of a backbone and say, this is where the council is getting things wrong. This is where certain people are stepping out of line and trying to exceed the bounds of their authority. I think it gives a little bit of safety to them, to the city manager, to fulfill their duties. And that's why I really don't want to pull this one out. I think having that safety net helps reinforce the backbone of the person who's in that position, knowing that there is something out there. Again, with this council and with Mr. Bricky that's been proposed for that position, I don't think we're going to have the issue, but I don't see any harm in including something in a contract to help solidify that. So I'm in favor of keeping that where it is. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to you. So, Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I echo much of what Councilmember McConaughey just said. The city manager would only get a severance if, am I not on? Okay, sorry. The city manager would only get a severance if the city council decides to let him go. He doesn't get the severance at the end of the 2 years when the contract is up. The contract is up, contract is up. So with that in mind, if you don't like the severance package, let's do everything we can to keep the relationship good so that we don't want to let him go sometime between now and 2 years from now. This council, knock on wood, knowing recent history, hopefully will be the same 7 people for the next 2 years. Ideally, that's what we were all elected for. Hopefully that we'll stick it out. No disparagement to those that may have wanted to leave early. I get it, things happen. However, hopefully we get the same council for the next 2 years. That said, let's keep the working relationship good. Let's keep the communication flowing back and forth. If Mr. Bricky is not meeting expectations for whatever reason, let's make that clear. Let's get some feedback. Let's open those lines of communication so that if it's a 6-month, 4-month, 3-month, 12-month, 18-year severance package, whatever it might be, we don't have to worry about it because we've done our job in working well together with our city manager. And if he screws up so bad that he broke the law and he has to go, well, then he doesn't get the severance anyway because that's malfeasance and he doesn't get it. So I don't see a problem with the severance package. I just don't see it ever coming into play with the individuals that are involved. Granted, there are some potential hypotheticals, but I don't think we have to worry about those. With regards to the salary, it was brought up by a few citizens, and I appreciate your input. At the same time, we don't have the luxury, because of the change in the form of government that is going into effect in 2 years, we don't really have the luxury of headhunting for this position. Maybe we do, and maybe that's a little short-sighted. Maybe there are others that would want a temp job for 2 years. I personally am relieved that we had somebody on staff when our previous city manager left who we could entrust with the responsibility of running the city on an interim basis, granted, and by removing the interim title, it doesn't mean it's not interim. In 2 years, the position is gone. So it's still an interim job. We don't have the luxury of going out and finding a 10-year city manager at this point. We don't have that. We don't have 10 years of city manager left. So at this point, we really have to embrace the situation we're in, and we are lucky that we have an individual in the city, on the staff, who can capably and I think exemplarily fill that position, and I'm 100% supportive of the contract for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the rules we have up here on the council, on the dais, is that every one of the council members would have an opportunity to speak before one that already spoke speaks again. So if Councilmember Burton wouldn't mind, because he wants to speak again, but Councilmember Whitelock is here as well. So if you can turn yours off, let her speak, and then we can come back to you again. Unless Councilmember Lamb comes in there. Councilmember Whitelock.
Am I on? Okay. I thought a lot about this, and we met in closed session and discussed the contract. I'm not sure that I agree with my fellow council members. I think there are ways to do contracts differently. I think that you can also have at-will employees. So I think there may have been a legal way to do it differently. But I'm going to read this because then I'll be able to convey everything I want to convey, because I get nervous up here. First off, I want to let everyone know that I am in full support of Mr. Bricky being our full-time city manager. I have observed him closely for several months, first as a city attorney, then as the interim city manager. I have also had a one-on-one meeting where we were able to share a little bit about ourselves and our vision for the city. From this time spent with Mr. Bricky, I've seen an individual that understands the political landscape, of our city, our county, and our state. He understands the growth we are facing and is willing to work with the council on what is best for the city. He is a good communicator, which is a quality I feel is needed for this position. So please, when I vote no on the contract, don't read anything into it. This is a 2-year contract, and I fully believe Mr. Bricky will be here for those 2 years and maybe beyond. My reasons for voting no on the contract are purely financial. I feel the compensation and severance are more than we should be offering. While I campaigned, I heard many times that we pay too much, and people are very upset about the city manager's severance packages. While I tried to work with my council members to get it to a more comfortable level for me, I was unable to do so, so hence I will be voting no on this contract. But again, Mr. Bricky is a great guy.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. May I ask our acting city attorney a couple of questions about this contract?
Please.
Okay. If he goes to full term, the 2 years, and then the job ends, what severance package will go to him by the way the contract is written right now?
Under the way the contract is written right now, there still will be a severance package. I know that was stated previously, but the way the contract is written, there will be one.
Okay. And if we remove that severance package, will we be breaking state code?
As to, you mean after the contract is terminated?
Yes.
That question is a little bit different. The way the statute reads, it says when they're removed from office. So the question would be, how would you define removed? And an argument could be made that removal could be any time that the person is required to leave the job, or you could interpret as to, saying when someone is terminated. I do believe that has not been decided by a court. I think it would probably likely that the court would decide that removal would mean termination and not an expiration of a contract, but there is a possibility of an argument both ways. So I don't think that answer is entirely clear, but I do think it would probably likely that it would not be in violation of state law if it wasn't taken out after the contract had terminated.
Thank you. Okay, I'll just make one more comment, and then I might not come back again. I might let the rest go. But as a electrical contractor, I get under contracts quite often, and my contracts are for the duration of a job. And I go out and I complete that job. When that job is finished, I get paid. That's the end of my contract, and I need to go find another job. So I am constantly looking for a different job, different work, and doing that. So it's common for me to go out and do that. So I don't find that extraordinarily difficult, knowing that your job is for 2 years and it'll end. We have lots of jobs throughout the state, the city, the country, where the jobs have expiration dates, and you just make lives in your plan. And with what he's getting, even if he doesn't get that severance pay, if you look at the contract, it's got lots of executive time, it's got vacation time, it's got holiday time, it's got sick leave, and it's got executive time that all add up that will carry on after that date is over, and provide him that additional time if he needs it. So I am in support of Dave Bricky as the city manager, but I will be voting against the contract.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. During these past few years, as we have discussed the form of government in West Jordan, the thing that always comes to light from everyone that I've heard that was against our current form of government was that darn city manager. Heard it several times, heard of all the bad things that have happened over the years, but I can say today, sitting on this dais, that if David Bricky were chosen as a manager for the next 10 years for West Jordan, I would choose him right now. He's done a great job in the short time he's been here. We haven't had any issues that I know of. I'm sure there's always issues, whether it's in a city or a business or whatever. And because of that, I move to approve Resolution 18-08, authorizing the mayor to execute a contract with David R. Bricky.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion.
Who gets credit for the second?
Who?
I used the mic. I cheated. I was first.
Okay, Councilmember Lamb made the motion. Councilmember McConaughey seconded first. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I did quote the code, but what I feel and why I'm going to be supportive of this is we have a lot of work to do in 2 years writing code for a new form of government. And like Councilmember McConaughey said, I would really like his full attention up until the form of government changes. And I'm not interested in changing city managers or anything like that. It's moving forward, moving upward. Let's get the job done and get us moving. That's all I have. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. Basically, I was going to say the same thing as Councilmember Anderson, so I'll just append to that I'm really appreciative to be working with a council where we can disagree on items like this without being disagreeable. I really appreciate the comments, the thoughts, the fact that we're able to come from differing perspectives, different opinions, without causing any derogatory comments to be sent to anybody. So I just want to say thank you to the council on this particular issue. It's a big issue. It's important to the city, to the staff, and to the residents. And the fact that we're able to do that without becoming, and still remaining amicable with each other, I think is impressive and speaks a lot to the character of everybody here. So thank you. That's all.
Thank you. I attended a meeting today where they honored the retiring city manager of St. George after 40 years of service in St. George. Don't know if that'll happen here, but I would certainly like to look forward to something like that. Let's vote.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Mayor Whiting.
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb.
Yes.
Councilmember Burton. No. Councilmember Whitelock.
No.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Aye.
Vote passes 5-2 in favor.
Okay, I'd like to invite the council to step down off the dais, and we're going to swear in our new city manager.
Mayor, as a point of privilege, may I ask Stacy Murdoch Bricky to join me? That's my wife.
Solemnly swear
I'd like to have our new city manager take a few moments, if he would.
I'm comfortable normally in a courtroom standing and talking on my feet, and I also want the public to be able to hear me. I am not offended by people exercising the right of free speech. I will be the first to defend that right. You have an obligation to step up and tell people what you think. In this community, we need to protect that every day. I appreciate any success I've had since I've been here is not a direct reflection of me personally doing the job. It's these people across the room. It's the attorneys that I work with daily that get the job done. It's a team concept that I hope we recognize right here, right now. The fact that you have confidence in me, I'm just thrilled. Thank you. I look forward on Friday to hearing what we can do to make things better and improve this city. You have my commitment for the next 2 years, and I hope longer. Thank you again.
And thank you very much. We'll now move to our consent calendar. Are there any consent items the council would like to pull for further discussion? Councilmember Burton.
I move to approve consent items.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion to the motion? Let's vote.
Councilmember Whitelock?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey?
Aye.
Councilmember Jacob?
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Mayor Whiting?
Yes.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
The vote passes 7 in favor.
Public hearing, item 9A. Receive public input and consider for approval ordinance 18-04 regarding a future land use map amendment for 33.49 acres from low-density residential to medium-density residential and rezone from LSFR, low-density single-family residential zone, to R-1-8D, single-family residential 8,000 square foot lots. Zone for property located at 7300 South, 5600 West. Perryland Investments, LLC. Dan Reeve applicant. Scott Langford.
Thank you, Mayor. We've already had a few comments regarding this item, but I want to turn some time over now to Kent Page. He's one of our senior planners. He'll give a quick summary of the request. The applicant is also present and is available to answer any questions. So, Kent?
Thank you. The City Council heard this item last October 17th. If I can press the right button, there we are. So this is just the official public hearing announcement or notice as the mayor read. So the Planning Commission considered this item after public hearing on October 17th, and their recommendation to the City Council is a negative recommendation because they found that did not meet the finding D as specified in the City Code, which is that the proposed amendment constitutes an overall improvement to the adopted general land use map and is not solely for the good or benefit of a particular person or entity. Staff can see how this proposed rezone could be argued as reasonable and also could be argued as maybe unreasonable using the general plan as a guide. It seems reasonable they would have high density to the north and medium density to the south, whereas this property with the future land use is low density. The request is to make that a medium density and to rezone it from low single family residential to R18. The general plan also talks about that the single family residential should be the primary land use of the city. And if we look closely at our future land use map and our current zoning, there's relatively fewer areas that are zoned single family residential or low density residential as compared to medium density or high density residential. Engineering has looked at this property that feel like we can service the proposed rezone in an adequate manner. The green line kind of represents a future network. There we are. So the proposal is for the road of 7400 South to proceed west and then connect with the future roadway networks around the Mountain View corridor. I'd be glad to address any particular questions you might have at this time, and Dan Reeve from Perry Homes is also here to address any of your questions.
Are there any questions for staff? Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. There was a question about drainage. Can you address that for us, please?
My memory is that staff has looked at it and drainage seems to be adequately anticipated with the construction of a detention basin. So there's no great worry that I am aware of from staff's point of view for drainage of this proposed rezone.
So with that drainage area apparently proposed to be next door to this gentleman's property, what are the odds that some of that could overflow onto his property and create a hazard?
I couldn't give you a specific answer to that. Maybe somebody from Public Works could. I do have some photographs that are perhaps a little bit more challenging to see, taken on the site looking at different directions. So there's definitely a grade from the west to the east that's a lower grade. It's pretty steep. It's pretty steep when it's abuts 56. For that reason, UDOT has recommended and staff has recommended that there be just one access onto and off of 56 from this location.
So the drainage is going into a retention pond, is that correct?
Yes, that would be the plan, to have it in the south east corner, I believe.
And is there an overflow in that retention pond?
I'm not aware of it. I don't think we've got to that detail. It's a good question to ask. What detail do you look at a rezone proposal? How much engineering or geotechnical reports do you require?
That's a good point. Thank you.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. So I don't know if this would be more appropriate for Public Works and water, but as far as the, it's been mentioned that our tanks only have 18-hour supplies. I mean, are we set for water infrastructure, storm drain, move the water away from there? Or what kind of storm drain are we putting in? Once a 10-year event drain or a 100-year event drain? And obviously that's all preliminary, but just kind of how are we planning around this?
So I think I caught two questions in there. The first one with regards to water. This area is served, will be served by our Zone 6 tanks, which has more than enough water for the zone. Plus, we're in the process of building 4 additional tanks in the city, based upon the council's approval and direction from the previous strategic planning meeting. That will increase our capacity for more than just this one subdivision. We don't have any concerns that we'll have an inadequate water supply to service this area. I think the second question you had was with regards to storm drain.
Yes.
Our development code requires that they design their detention basins to serve a 100-year storm event. And then they do, unless there's extenuating circumstances, are required to have an outfall, which I would assume would tie into 5600 West. So we should be all right there. I mean, there's always going to be a bigger storm than a 100-year storm that comes along some days, sometime. But we found that this is legally defensible and it generally keeps people safe.
Okay, I just over time we've had areas that have experienced flooding in basements and stuff like that because we're not able to move water quick enough.
Basement flooding is typically a different flooding problem than surface runoff. Basement flooding typically comes from groundwater, a high groundwater table, rather than surface runoff problems. The codes that we have nowadays regarding grading and drainage are pretty sound and typically take care of our neighborhoods really, really well.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
If I could just add, in talking with Nate Nelson, our city engineer, he noted that currently the city is unable to service water to the west of this proposed rezone or onto the west side of the transmission lines, but there's plenty of adequacy to service water at this particular site.
Okay, Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. I know this is a hearing about rezoning, but one of the concerns that I heard tonight was the drainage basin and the location. Those in Ivory Homes development are worried that drainage basin being right next to their homes could potentially cause flooding. Is there any way that we can look at moving that? And I mean, I know they haven't finished the design of the subdivision just yet, but is there any way to move that from a different location so it's not located right next to the Ivory Homes development?
Dan could probably address this question better than I could if he's here. I guess it's always possible, just how probable.
Yes.
Thank you. Dan Reed with Perry Homes in Murray. Regarding that detention pond location, the reason it's shown there in the concept is that is the lowest point of the site. The land slopes to the southeast and it's in that corner. But as Kent Page indicated, as we get into engineering and the platting process, all of this will be thoroughly looked at. I've been out to the Nelson's home, which is the home adjacent to the detention area, and visually, certainly the home sits up higher, but physically the lot sits up a little higher than where it currently is, but certainly it would be dug down even further. So, and I've emphasized before that Perry is just as concerned about these water issues as anybody. We certainly do not want flooded basements or flooded yards or any of these types of water problems. So we go to great lengths for that. So,
thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. And this question is directed to legal, and I'm asking primarily because there are a number of new faces that are on the City Council, and we've also changed the process for considering rezones. We used to not have people bring the preliminary plan with them and just discuss the rezone itself. So as we're getting into some of the engineering issues, I'm wondering if we might be diving into items that we may not be able to use as we make our consideration. I know there's certain factors we can consider when looking at a rezone, but I know there's others that we can't. So my question for Mr. Dodd would be if you can give us kind of a quick overview of the kinds of factors that we are permitted to consider when we're discussing a rezone compared to an approval for a development plan.
Obviously, when the rezone is done, the application process for the rezone is not as specific and as intense as when there's the application for the development plan and the final plat. I think what I've noticed on some of the applications for rezone, especially when we got into details as to what the homes may look like or to, the issues related to that, what we're going to require them to have on the facades, et cetera, that's going beyond what's required in the application for the rezone. Those preliminary applications don't get into that, and a lot of the other engineering dealing with those specifics aren't known. So I don't think it'd be appropriate to really consider that. I think this might be something Scott Langford could also provide a little bit of insight to.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think there's wisdom in part to show a concept because it gives the council the ability to give some feedback to potential developers. However, with any land use map amendment or rezone, the city council has a lot of deference, a lot of discretion when it comes to that. Does it fit within the fabric of the community? And that, is it good for the health and well-being of the neighborhood and then the city as a whole? Now, the city council has adopted some specific findings, and you'll find that in Title 13 of our code, and it starts on page 3 of your staff report, I believe, where you can go through those different findings of fact. And we found over the years that if the council follows those criteria that have been adopted by ordinance, there's there's a lot of direction that can be given to staff and the applicant, and it also provides enough flexibility and deference to the council. I don't know if that answers your question, Councilman, but...
Thank you to both. It doesn't. It was kind of a cheat question to get sort of like a mini training snuck in there. But I guess the point that I want to underscore is the idea that just because we may approve or deny a zoning does not necessarily mean that any of the other elements that we've touched on would necessarily be binding to the property owner. If we were to say, yes, let's go ahead and make the change, conditioned on adding additional drainage, that's not really something that we can do. That would be part of the development plan. It's not uncommon for a developer to purchase a piece of property, change the zoning, take care of some of the entitlements, and then sell it to somebody else for further development, and that somebody else would be the one bound to the development plan. So while it's helpful to have the conversation, I think very appropriate as well, since there are folks here in the audience who have this specific concern, so I think it's very appropriate that we discuss it. I just want to make sure that it's clear among ourselves that that's probably not one of the factors that should be driving one way or the other. But it's, Mr. Langford pointed out, it is good to drive home to the applicant that if they're going to further develop the property, that's something that we're watching closely. So, thank you, Mayor.
Any further questions for staff? Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I have several comments, but I'll save those for after the public hearing. One quick question for staff. This, I just want to be clear, and on the map it's fairly clear, but I just want to be certain that we are not considering this entire low-density zone for rezone, right? The piece to the west that's on the other side of the power lines there is not included.
That's correct. It's just the area highlighted in the pink, I suppose.
Okay.
It's about 33 point something acres.
Okay, and do you know how many are left over on that remainder piece over there? I mean, no, we're not considering it, but I'm just...
It's about 22 from my recollection, but I can look that up as we're discussing.
All right, thanks.
Okay, I would invite the applicant if he would like to address us in this regard.
Certainly. Again, Dan Reed with Perry Homes. Pleasure to be here, and thank you for what you do for this city. We've enjoyed our good business relationship with you for years and look forward to many more. We certainly understand all of the concerns that were expressed at Planning Commission, both by the Commission and by the residents. We've taken a lot of that input, both from the Commission and meeting with several of the residents. I've met with, reached out to all those who voiced concern or opinions at the last meeting. Marie Godfrey, Jordan Douglas, the Nelsons who are here, Emily Backus, Kathy Alberico, others that have expressed concern. And certainly there's no way to please everyone, but we're certainly trying. We feel that this is a good use of this land. Based on the medium density has been expressed that's to the south, the high density to the north, the recent increase in density farther to the west beyond our other property, I believe it's the Crescent Rim project. So this area has changed. We certainly build quality homes, but we don't feel that this is a low density or an R114 area with a power corridor to the west and a very busy 56 west to the east. Hence, we are proposing what we felt was a good blend to this community to bridge the R110 to the south to the R16 to the north. Some of the concerns that were expressed last meeting, and I'll try to be brief just to help address some of these concerns. First of all, in speaking with a lot of the neighbors, and I heard some of it tonight, it sounds like there's a misconception that the property to the south, the Ivory subdivision, is currently low density. It's a beautiful community. We want to add to this community, but it technically is medium density, so I think a lot of people have been spooked with the medium density proposal, but it is the same land use as has been expressed as is to the south. Now, certainly to the south, it's an R110 D and E. We are previously have proposed an R18D. If there is a motion proposed tonight to approve, we would request that motion, based on Planning Commission input and other input from the neighbors, that this be an R18E, so increasing the home size to the 3,000 square foot or greater homes. There certainly have been concerns expressed about home values. I even heard tonight fears of starter homes. These certainly will not be starter homes unless you consider starter homes being in the 400,000 range. Based on current market conditions right now, if the council is curious, the projected starting price will be around $375 based on this larger home size, going up to about $475, and those are base prices. By the time you factor in lot premiums and most people upgrade, obviously it creeps up from there. So these certainly are not starter homes. This is going to be a complementary neighborhood as Summer Glen to the south. So as far as the difference in lot sizes, as some may be aware, the difference between an R18 lot and an R110 lot, as far as lot width, is about 10 feet. If you're looking for it, you certainly can see it, but driving through a neighborhood, it's hard to really tell that difference, but it may not be as drastic as some people may be thinking. Certainly there are concerns about traffic. We need to connect to the existing stubs. There are 4 stubs to the south coming up from Ivory and 2 from the north from Sienna Vista. So we certainly do need to connect to those, and traffic will increase. It's been planned that way, that there's that connectivity. But we're also sensitive, and we're going to do all that we can within reason to minimize that traffic input, whether it be T intersections, as has been requested, other traffic calming measures. Again, pending engineering and other constraints, we're going to do what we can. We want this to be a very nice neighborhood, just like everybody else. We've addressed stormwater. Certainly, that will be thoroughly examined at the engineering stage. I think that about covers. There were a lot of concerns, so that's kind of what they boiled down to. So I'm certainly here to entertain any questions you may have.
Questions, Councilmember Conahey.
Thank you, Mayor. Question for Mr. Langford. Can you give us the size requirements for the D-size homes versus the E-size homes? There used to be a cheat sheet up here, but I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, I've got it on my screen, actually. So for a Rambler, a D-size home, D as in dog, is 2,600 square feet. An E-size home is 3,000 square feet. That's a Rambler. Two-story, sort of multi-story dwelling for a D size is 2,700 square feet, and E is, again, 3,000. So since I do have the mic, when you have 8,000 square foot lots, and granted that's the minimum, if you look at the concept, there's definitely lots larger than 8,000 square feet. But if you're looking at an 8,000 square foot lot with the setbacks and so on and so forth, it's challenging if they were to try to put a 3-car garage, depending on the home design. And that's why if you look at our code, we have a general matrix that lines up with the home size versus the zoning district. So just wanted to throw that out there, that the larger the home, that's great, but it's going to be challenging to get 3-car garage. It'll likely be a lot of 2-story homes there.
And then, although there's a fair number of thoughts I'd like to share, I'll wait till after the public hearing. And then just confirmation that I heard you right, where you said, although the application says R18 with the D-size home, you'd be okay with R18 with the E-size home. I heard that correctly, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And quick clarification, too, on garages. We have a hard time selling 2-car garages in this price range, and we have plenty of floor plans that do have the tucked away 3rd-car garage. So good point, though.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. You kind of mentioned with a if I understand correctly, with an E-size home, you're looking a house price would be somewhere in the $375,000 to $475,000. If it were a D-size home, 2,700 square feet, I'm assuming probably a 2-story to get the 3rd-car garage. What would a price point be in there for D-size?
We were projecting from $350 to about $450 in that range on the D size. But now that we're going to larger, bumps it up to the $375 to $475.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions? At this time, I'll open the public hearing. If there's anyone present who would like to address the council on this issue, please come forward. Please. Give us your name and contact information, please.
Point of order, Mayor.
Brad Nelson, you already have my contact information.
I'm sorry.
Our rules only allow for speaking about an item one time. So with the public hearing, the option is to take that time either during the citizen comments where the 5 minutes was taken, or wait until the public hearing. So since there's already been an opportunity to speak, we typically don't allow folks the option to speak multiple times.
You've had the opportunity to speak earlier.
I did.
So is that...
Our new city manager said he likes to have free speech, so I just want to, if I want to make comment.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And that's just to reinforce that the primary concern is that we don't have mismatched neighborhoods. We moved into Ivory Homes. It's a very nice neighborhood. Homes are big, the yards are big, and I'm concerned because I'm going to be neighbors with these Perry homes. I would like them to be compatible to make it look like the entire West Jordan community of the Highlands is a match and not just an effort to cram in more houses, and to make it so it uplifts and beautifies the community rather than just as an economic, let's pack it in and see how many homes we can sell.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you want to make a comment? Okay. Please state your name and contact information, please.
Steve Jones, 3234 West, 6920 South, here in West Jordan. Just a couple of comments that I've noticed on this particular topic. One thing that I continually don't see is when we're talking about a change in the plan map is like the area to the north there, is what did that used to be before they changed it to an R16C? And I think that has relevance in when we make these changes, and then the next guy comes in and goes, oh geez, you know, well the property to the north is R16C, so I'm okay putting a higher density in there, when originally it wasn't planned that way. So I got a little bit of a problem with knowing what's happening over time to these pieces of property. I am very much adamant against these higher densities. I'm getting really tired of these contractors coming in and saying, this is only what people want. I don't buy it. They're selling homes right and left. Sorry. Now, their profit margin might not be as high. That's too bad. But I live on a 10,000 square foot lot. I can't imagine anybody putting an east-size home on an 8,000 square foot lot. It just blows my mind that I have to pay that much money for a home and yet be able to shake hands with my neighbor without ever coming out of my front door. You know, this is getting beyond ridiculous. We should be able to have decent-sized lots with decent-sized homes. Now, if the city of West Jordan wants east-sized homes, then minimum size should be 10,000 square foot. End of discussion. Shouldn't be anything less than that. You're going to pay that much money for a home. Another $25,000 is not for having a little bit of room around you besides throwing a rock and hitting your back fence. I think that's what people want. I know there's some statistics out that say that's not what people want, but I think right now it's what we're getting and what the cities are approving and what our developers are forcing down our throats. I take a little bit of exception to Justin's comments, though, on basement flooding. After living in a neighborhood for 30 years and watching my neighbors get flooded, it is about runoff, and there is a tremendous amount of runoff that happens when we get these cloudbursts. Everybody told us our system was designed for 100 years, but in reality it wasn't designed for a 10-year average. So I am kind of sensitive to this, and that retention pond better be deep enough to handle a true 100-year flood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alexandria Framer, 3735 Judd Circle. I am against rezoning this to medium density. You know, we talked about this 2 weeks ago. These developers, I don't know, are they forgetting that people do want to come in with starter homes? Why are we agreeing to $375,000 to $400,000 homes? I said I have a third of an acre. and I bought my home for $99,000, okay. And I just don't understand trying to get more houses and so expensive. Are we not thinking about the other people? Are we not starting to think about our children and our grandchildren who do want to have a starter home? Maybe they want a home for $250,000. But why $375,000, $400,000? And I'm really, really against that medium density. I think we should retain, we should have as much space as we can. We do not want to be New York City, one house against the other, where you don't even have any land. I'm against it. I've always been against high density. I've been against, in this area, I'm against medium density. Let's keep it at that low density. And I'm really worried about the water situation and the flooding that may occur. But I don't know where they think these millionaires are going to come and buy these $400,000 homes, $450,000 home. I don't get it. It seems like for the last couple months, we've had more developers and more developers coming and putting in homes that are $400,000. And what kind of reputation are we going to have in Salt Lake City County? You know, you can't move here unless you have lots of bucks. You need a lot of money to come to West Jordan. I don't get it. I mean, we have to think about people with lower incomes. Let's think about the people with smaller homes, the starter homes. I don't get it. There's nothing wrong with having you're saying you want all the homes to look alike. There's nothing wrong with having a $375,000 home along with the $250,000. I don't see anything wrong with that. Anyway, I'm against this rezoning. Thank you.
Are there any others who wish to speak to this issue? Seeing none, I'll close the public comments and take it back to council. Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the comments that have been made and the presentation by the applicant and the staff. There's a lot of misconception out there, I think, regarding zoning. And I had it too. 3 years on the Planning Commission, 2 years on the council. I understand. You hear the word medium density, and what do you think? You think Daybreak. You think townhomes. You think like my neighborhood where we have several homes that share one driveway. They're single-family homes, but we're kind of stacked in on top of each other. In our code, those are actually called high density. Now, maybe we need to work on our code. We may need to reword some things. I challenge, I shouldn't say that, but I will. I challenge most people to drive through a neighborhood and tell me if their lots that they're looking at are 8,000 square foot lots or 10,000 square foot lots. Most of the time, you won't be able to tell the difference. Now, if you're experienced at zoning issues and you've been to lots of city council meetings and you've talked about this a lot, you can probably tell a difference if you know what to look for. But I think for the most part, you see a big lot, you see a big house, you see a smaller lot with a big house, you're not going to know right off the top of your head what the zoning is in that neighborhood. Many people that don't attend city council meetings and that are, a little more of a less engaged, let's say, probably don't know what the zoning is. The code of the zoning is where they live. They know, hey, I have this house and I have this nice yard, and I know what that feels like because this is my house and this is my yard, whether I live in an R1 8, 10, 12, or something else. I think the key to this rezone is that it's an R1, first of all, single-family homes. That's really important. Multifamily homes would not go here. High density, when I hear high density, I think apartment buildings, I think townhomes. Would not fit here. I totally agree with those that are against high density. Spot on. You're right. It wouldn't go here. This doesn't work. But I think you'll find when this is all said and done that driving from one neighborhood, well, at least from the neighborhood to the south up to the north, you won't notice an appreciable increase in density. You just won't. Driving from the north to the south, you'll notice an appreciable decrease because the Siena Vista homes are significantly more dense. So 6,000 square foot lots to a 10,000 square foot lot, you can tell. They're right on top of each other. Setbacks are also a lot smaller on a 6,000 square foot lot. That's the distance between their property line and the house, because they have to be, because you have a smaller lot. If you're going to have the same setback as you have on a 10,000 square foot lot, you'd have a shack in the middle of the yard, and that would be all you'd get. So just a little information there. Oh, and by the way, somebody mentioned the history of the Siena Vista, Steve, I think it was you. The Siena Vista neighborhood is interesting because it was supposed to be an R18 initially, and there was supposed to be, an R18, and the developer came to the city council and said, how about we do 6,000 square feet, but we'll put in a nice big park. That way we'll take all the little pieces of open space and kind of push them all together. And so every house has a smaller yard, but you have access to this nice big park. And then a couple years later, they came back and said, well, we don't want to build a nice big park, so they built more homes, and that was allowed. And I disagreed with that decision at that time as well. That said, I'm fully in support of this rezone. It just makes sense to go from a 6 to an 8 to a 10 and have that transition there. And another comment that was made, I absolutely agree with. You're right, we're making our bed. We have to live with the decisions that we make. And this rezone will affect the rezones that will come down the line of the property across the street to the east and the property on the other side of the power lines to the west. It will affect that. And we definitely need to keep that as a criteria when we're making this decision. It's not, nothing happens in a vacuum. We talked about this a couple weeks ago when we were talking about the property on 90th South. And there was already the apartments that were between the subject property and the industrial area. And people said, oh, we don't need housing this close to the industrial area. But we already had housing this close to the industrial area. They weren't wrong, but that bridge had been crossed. So I'll leave my comments there. I'm fully in support of this. It makes sense given the current climate of what is already in place. It makes sense to go from high to medium to low. And again, the R110 is not low, but it's lower. So from high to medium to less medium, it makes sense. It fits here. So I'm in support of this proposal. Thanks.
Councilmember Whitelock.
I am not in support of it, and Mr. Jones basically said what I would say, is that as I've watched the council, over and over, developers come in and want to change density, and we allow them, and a prior member of the council to balance that used to say, well, will you do a higher house? So instead of a C, would you do a D or an E? And the developers would usually agree to that. But my concern is we have to the west, low density. To the east, we have very low density, which currently is a dairy farm, or a cat. No, it's not dairy, because they sell their meat. It's a beef farm. But I think we need to decide as a city, we're either going to try to follow our plan and develop a city with steps, or we're just going to throw it and let whatever happens, happens. And that concerns me because of some of the things that have been mentioned tonight. I want it to be a good plan for our city that works for our city. So I took a drive out there because I don't live in that area. And I noticed that we have a lot of high density and a lot of the maybe medium density. Fellow councilman is correct. I couldn't tell what the density is necessarily, but I can tell you when I look at homes, I can say, wow, those are really close together. And for me, that wouldn't be my comfort level. But more importantly, I want a variety of homes and opportunities for people to move to our city. And if we keep taking our low density and we bump it up, we're not going to have many opportunities for people that would like to have the bigger home and the bigger property. For me personally, I wouldn't want the bigger home on the smaller property. But, so I think the Planning Commission got it right, and I will be siding with them. And I think maybe what we need to do, and I kind of think I've heard that the general plan is going to be looked at again. But, you know, that's probably what we need to do. But we need to have a good plan in our city. We need to look at it maybe with different eyes. I don't know when this was developed last, but we probably need to look at it with different eyes, because if it was done 15 years ago, we have a different society than we did then. But we need to, I just feel that we need to look at what the plan is and not always change. And I think there were good comments tonight, and I hate to see the other low and the very low then get the same argument that, well, all around it is high density and medium density, so that's what we should do here. So I will have to vote no on this one.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to play a little bit and share my screen, but before I do, I want to point out that what we're seeing on the map here, that high density section to the top, the 5.1 to 10, the R16, that's something that's already out there. It's already been developed. The medium density that's below this, same thing. This is where we have the neighborhood that's currently existing. So you've got this other piece of property that's kind of sandwiched in there. I think I agree with what Councilmember Jacob was saying, where it kind of makes sense to have the transition between the two. I don't know that having the low density right smack between the other two makes a lot of sense. Not my first choice to do away with some of the low density that we have, but where a mistake may have been made in approving a different zone previously, I think we need to try and work with what we have to make the best, rather than creating a different and opposite mistake to try and offset. Yeah, I'll leave that comment at that. So Councilmember Burton and I, yes, please. Councilmember Burton and I, we're looking just a little bit at what we've got up on Google Maps. So this isn't immediately available in the presentation, so sorry, I just kind of stole it. So hopefully you'll see here in just a second. It just takes it a second.
Or I chose the wrong one.
No, wrong one. Actually, it was the right one, I just wasn't plugged in.
Oh, well.
Although if we can let you keep the blame for my mistake, I'd be happy.
This is right. We're good?
Melanie ends up taking the blame for a lot of our mistakes. Are you okay? It's doing the extended desktop. Crap. That's okay. That's okay. I'll move it over here. So you can kind of see the area that we're looking at. Just to kind of help you orient, here is the Smith's Marketplace that's right at 56 and 78. This was that high density portion that had already been zoned that we were pointing out. And then this is that Ivory community. And then right here in the middle is the section that's being discussed. I think what's been proposed, where we match the zoning basically of what we have to the south, it's the 2,000 square foot, the lower limit for the lot size is 2,000 square foot less than what we have to the south. But to the south, where it allows both D and E size homes, if this were to allow just E size homes, I think it would be very comparable to what we have on the south. Then here up top, we have 6,000 square foot lots. I think that helps make the appropriate buffer between the two and kind of transition, so that we're not looking at necessarily just the transition between these two neighborhoods, but also between that and the neighborhood to the north. As we're looking out to the west, I think it's helpful to note that we're not looking at a blank slate for this entire piece. And Mr. Langford can correct me if I'm wrong, but there were conversations a couple of years ago, I believe we approved the preliminary plan for this property, and I tried to line up the lines as much as possible, so you can kind of see conceptually what's coming in between Mountain View Corridor and the area that we're discussing on the map right here. So you do have a lot of homes, multiple uses, multiple densities that are being brought in. This is a master plan community, and I think what's been proposed would fit well as we're looking at the area as a whole. I agree with the idea that I don't like to get rid of the zoning that we have, the low density. I want to make sure that we have a good balance and people have plenty of options when they're looking at housing in West Jordan. But for this particular area, I don't, and I'm being very careful about my word choice here, I don't see a defensible reason to deny the property owner the opportunity to change the zoning on the property. If there were something that I thought conflicted with the general plan or conflicted with the anticipated use of where we're going with this as a city as a whole, then I would be in opposition. But I don't see any defensible reason why we would be able to say, no, your plan's not consistent with everything else that's going on in this area. So that's kind of the visual behind my thought process, just so you guys can kind of get a better feel for where I'm coming from. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. If we could go back to the packet and the zone map picture with the, yeah, that one. Thank you. So just for clarification, Scott, the high density 5.1 to 10, that's units per acre, or that's what it could be?
That is correct.
And then the current low density is 1 to 3 units per acre. The medium density below that is 3.1 to 5 units per acre. So I don't want to say times change, but the economy definitely changes. And I remember when I bought my first house, I was able to do sweat equity in order to offset some of my my down payment to make the mortgage company happy. I work at a school where I have fill out requests for employees that are trying to get mortgages to buy homes. And right now, most mortgage companies are asking about 20% down, unless you've got some specific jobs or, you know, I don't know, public service or school teacher where you can offset that. So I'm struggling to find a way. I don't want to say I'm not struggling to find a way to say no. I don't know that I, in my mind, can say no from the standpoint of the property to the south is R110 with size D and E homes, 3.1 to 5 units per acre. This one would change, I think it was 3.3 units per acre. Is that right, Scott, about that? Or no, that's on this little zoning distribution chart. It's about 3.3 on an R18. And so to me, it seems like it is a good transition from the high density to the medium density. As far as economic changes, I talked a little bit about mortgages or the ability to purchase a home, which is what Ms. Efremo mentioned. You look at something like Daybreak, which is a planned community, and there seems to be a desire of certain members of the population to have a home that they can be in and a yard they don't have to maintain. There are cities that are eliminating big box retail from their zoning maps because big box retail is not an economic engine anymore, and you're seeing that. So if we took away high density, low density, very low density, we're looking to the east and saying those homes are right now, as it's zoned, 2 units per acre, so that would theoretically say a half-acre lot. The medium density and the proposed medium density would be basically 3 acres of lots. You could argue that's a third of an acre lot. The high density is 5 units per acre, so that's a fifth of an acre. I don't know, I'm kind of rambling right now, but there's a lot of things that we have to do with the general plan. There's a lot of things we have to do with how we do zoning. Anyway, that's all I have. Thanks, Mayor.
Any other comments? Do we have a motion? Councilmember Anderson.
I'm going to move to approve Ordinance 18-04 regarding future land use map amendment for 33.49 acres from low-density residential to medium-density residential and rezone from low-density single-family residential zone to R18. I'm going to make this one with R18, D as in dog.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Anderson, a second by Councilmember Jacob. Discussion to the motion?
I would like to substitute that motion, change it to an E, leave the rest the same.
Second.
Substitute motion.
I second that.
There's a second, okay. Discussion to that motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
Councilmember McConaughey?
Aye.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock?
No.
Mayor Whiting?
No.
Councilmember Jacob?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
No.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Vote passes 4-3 in favor.
Public
Mayor?
hearing, I'm sorry.
I move that we take a 5-minute break.
We have a motion and a second to take a 5-minute break. Let's
Mayor?
do it.
Mayor?
Nope.
Before we do that, before we vote on the motion, I would just ask that we be careful about keeping it to 5 minutes, since we do have 2 more public hearings and we do have a fair number of people here for the one business item following those. So let's make sure it's actually 5 minutes and not 12.
I tend to watch the clock very closely, I think, if you noticed last time. 5 minutes it is. Do we need to vote on that, Melanie? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? One opposed. Okay. Okay.
Did you order it yet?
No, I had a protein bar, so I'm good.
I keep forgetting to eat dinner before going to this. I gotta start eating.
Until 10,
I gotta.
Melanie has protein bars in her office. Watch out.
And I have a little bit of homemade candy.
I should start bringing stuff.
Okay, here we go. I have started an office pool about what month Alexander will talk to me.
The problem is she's got it wrong. The Tribune is Media One, so she was saying that Kaylee was lying. She's not. The Tribune.
Yeah, Kaylee, we don't want to respond. We don't want to respond during.
No, I get that, but she's wrong about.
She is wrong. So what? I'd like to call the meeting back to order. 5 minutes and 23 seconds. Okay, we'll move on to public hearing item 9B, receive public input and consider for approval resolution 18-14, amending the fiscal year 2017-2018 uniform fee schedule. Steve Blaine.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This public hearing is regarding updates to the uniform fee schedule, which includes all fees and charges from all departments throughout the city. The changes that are being proposed tonight include 3 adjustments to existing fees and the creation of 1 new fee, and also a few administrative and typo corrections. Maybe I can summarize the largest changes, and I'll do my best to answer any questions that you have. First of all, the first change is to sewer or wastewater fees, which were already approved back in December by the council. The second change is to animal control fees for spaying and neutering of cats and dogs. The reason this fee needs to increase is because those fees have not changed for about 15 years, and we're having a hard time finding veterinarians that are willing to do the spay and neutering surgeries for the fees that we currently charge. We believe that increasing those fees by $10 each will make it much easier to find veterinarians that are willing to do the surgeries. The third change is in the water meter installation fee. This is the fee that we charge for any new meters at a new construction site. We provide the meter, make sure it gets installed, and we charge the actual cost. It's sort of a pass-through fee. Whatever we pay to the manufacturer for the meter, we pass that cost on to the developer. And occasionally, the manufacturer increases their prices. We simply need to pass on that cost to the developer. The new fee that is being proposed to be created is one that we're calling a recording and bonding process change fee. This fee will allow the city to recover costs of staff time, basically, that are required when a developer decides to change the process that they use in bonding. In other words, we currently offer 2 different options to a developer. There's 2 different processes that they can choose from when they bond for public improvements. I believe state law requires us to offer both of those options, but what we're seeing is that many times a developer will choose one option to begin with, and then a few weeks or months later they'll change their mind and select the other option, which is permissible, and there are benefits to that to the developer. Sometimes they can postpone the payment of some bonds, and they can actually speed up their construction a little bit. But what happens is that staff is required to go through the whole process again. We've already gone through the paperwork and the approvals for the first process, and then if they change to the second process, we have to do the paperwork and do field inspections to determine the status of all of the public improvements, to determine what the new bonding amount will be. So the purpose of this new fee would simply be to cover the costs that staff are seeing when the change in process happens. Those are the main changes that we're recommending, in addition to several typo corrections. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions from staff? Councilmember Whitelock.
Do you happen to know how much the Humane Society charges for spay and neuter?
I don't.
Okay. I should have looked it up, and I didn't.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering on the water meters, I understand that we have some employees that drive around, and I am assuming read, and I know this is for new stuff, but they read meters like with RFID or some sort of a transmission device, and these are the same type of meters. Do we know? Well, I'll have to do that for maybe Friday. So these would be the new meters. They have a life of 30 years or something like that. They communicate with technology so that we have accurate reads. I don't know, maybe Justin or Steve.
So these are the meter costs that we're changing are not just residential, but they're commercial as well. It's all of the meters that we are installing. The meters themselves have a longer life than the registers do. Registers tend to wear out really quickly. When I say quickly, they wear out in about 10 years. The new technology that we're putting into our water meters allows them to be read using the same technology, the 4G technology that's in your phones. And so we're looking at the ability to read them. The previous meters that we used, I don't mean to go into anything too huge here, but it was a 3G technology where you had to drive by the house to read it. That technology's gone. We can't even buy those registers anymore. And so the meters that we're installing have a 4G register in them that allow us to read much further distances, potentially through towers. And so the registers themselves can last between 10 to 15 years. The meters themselves last much longer, close to 25 to 30 years. But they do incorporate all the newest technologies that we can use to be able to read them more efficiently using better technology.
Okay, thank you. And then, Steve, the one for you on the new fee for recording and bonding process change fee, did the staff analyze how much staff time and the other miscellaneous expenses so that the $250 is an adequate cost to provide that service?
Yes, we have. It's not included in your report here, but we can provide that to you. We've looked at administrative staff, attorneys, engineers, even the city manager and the public works director all have to approve various steps of these processes. We can provide that to you if you need it.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may steal the screen once more. This time I did plug in. So here is the fee schedule that was being proposed and Councilmember Whitelock's question, what the Humane Society charges. You can see that like dog spaying up to 50 pounds, 73, versus where we're currently at 55 today. The new fee would be at 65, which is still substantially lower than what they've got. This is really kind of interesting. So thought it would be worth putting up on the screen for a second or two for everyone to see. That's all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. No further questions. At this time, I will open the public hearing. If there's anyone from the community who would like to address the council on this issue, please come up. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and go for a motion.
I'll go first. I move to approve the changes being recommended by staff. Or, oh, you need it.
All right, Councilmember Burton's got his.
Thank you, Mayor. So I got a call a couple of days ago about our fees, and I want to bring this up to the council to see what your thoughts are if you want to discuss this while we have this open and on our agenda right now. So this gentleman is looking to put a business here in West Jordan. He's got it in some other cities, and it's an arcade where you put a nickel in and play the arcade game. And he went to get the business license, and it turns out that our fee for him getting the business license is not just a regular business license fee, but it's also $25 per machine, and he was planning on putting 150 machines in this location. And when he saw how much that cost annually, he left the business license office and said he doesn't want to do that right now. So they told him to call me, and he did. So My question is, do we want to discuss this now, or would you like me to bring this back at another time? With the help of Councilman McConaughey and the Chamber of Commerce, researched some other cities to see what they charge, and places like Salt Lake City charge $3 a machine. Places like Sandy and Murray have a flat rate that they charge, not a price per machine, just a flat rate. And I would go over all those, but the battery on my telephone died, and they were text message it over to me. So I'm going to look at Councilman McConaughey's instead. So Riverton is $35 a machine. Sandy has no price per machine, but $500 for the arcade. Right. So no machine fee, just a disproportionate service fee. Salt Lake City was $3. I remembered that one because it was so different. Murray has a flat fee of $150. And Draper has no fee. So it's all over the board, depending on where they are. And I would just assume if he's going to open a business, that his business would be in West Jordan and not in another city. So I would like to hear from you. Do we want to discuss this right now and maybe make this change while we're making these other changes?
Well, and I think I'd just like to say that I'd like to bring it back at another time and have probably an actual schedule worked out with the business licensing folks and with staff, and then come back with a recommendation to council as to exactly what you would rather have that be. And so with that said, I'll go on to Councilmember McConaughey because he's up next.
Thank you, Mayor. Two thoughts. First of all, going along with Councilmember Burton's, this particular gentleman, if you were to put in 150 machines at $25 a piece, that would drive the business license fee up to $3,750. And as we're looking at what the fee would be in other cities where some have zero difference, others 500, I think was the other highest that we had. I would not be opposed to approving a fee schedule that includes a cap on that, was it amusement machine fee, or what did we call it in ours? Whatever we called it in ours, I would not be opposed to putting a cap on that at $500. That would still put us right at the top end, but $3,750 when I'm doubtful that the city performs a service that would warrant that kind of price tag with those additional machines. It was also interesting to learn that if a business puts in a jukebox or an air hockey table or a pool table, they also have to pay those types of fees. I had not previously realized that, so to limit them, anyway. So that's comment number one. I would be supportive of a motion to include that cap. Number two, Council Member Nichols, when he was still on the council, brought up an issue that he had with his small business. He does photography on the side, and occasionally he'll go into national parks and shoot photographs out there. He's required to have insurance when he does that. And in order to get insurance, he has to have a business license. Well, the law was changed last year at the state to say home-based businesses that have low or no impact are not cannot be charged a fee for those businesses or for those business licenses. What happened as a city is here we amended our code and we basically said you're not required to get a city business license if you are low impact or no impact. So we're no longer tracking those businesses. We no longer know what's out there. But for folks like him, when he goes to apply for one, he's still being required to pay for that fee. I just wanted to point out real quick, and while I've still got the screen up here, we'll bring this over. And I want to thank Councilmember Jacob on this because the conversations with him, I was going to suggest that we add another line item for a business license. You know, I'm in the wrong spot on this, but that's okay. I was going to suggest with the business license, we add a line that says, for a business license where it's not required, you're just asking one, we charge a minimal fee, perhaps $10, something like that. However, we go to state code. This includes the amendment made last year. A municipality may not require a license for this, but Part B, this was the part that stuck out to me more. A municipality may not charge a license fee for a home-based business unless the combined offsite impact of the home-based business and the primary residential use materially exceeds the offsite impact of the primary residential use alone. What that means is if you're operating a home-based business and you don't have any impact on traffic, on infrastructure, or anything else, we cannot charge a fee. I'm not sure, and I'm seeing a microphone light up over here, where somebody does request a license because they need it for insurance purposes and we're charging them. I'm not sure how we fall in line with law. So before I finish my comments, I'd be interested to hear from Mr. Dodd.
Please.
Sorry, Mayor.
No, please, go ahead.
Two comments. To address the first issue of the business license fee for the machines, I spoke with Duncan Murray, who's been working on this, and he actually told me that we are in the process right now that we've hired an outside agency to go over all of our fees, and it should be done within a matter of a couple months to determine justifications and the basis for those fees to comply with the new statute, state statute related to those fees, and that should be done quickly. So as to the issue of, the $25 fee for each machine, if there's not a justification for a service that we provide to maybe inspect those machines or whatever, if that's not justified, then we'll have data and a basis to know what to adjust it to and what would be a proper cap or what would be a proper amount to adjust it to. So that would probably, I do agree that it looks like we should, that could be something could be considered by the council to determine, but it'd probably be wise to at least wait until we have that data so the decision we make isn't just as arbitrary as previously, and we will have that data pretty soon, is my understanding. As to your second question, would you mind stating that again?
So right now, currently, if you call up business licensing, they'll tell you that if you're running a photography business out of your home, a business license is not required. If you still need a license because you have to go apply for insurance or something like that, you're charged the $50 development admin fee and you're charged a $40 business license fee. And as I'm reading the change to code right here, it doesn't say the municipality is not required to license the business. It says the municipality may not charge a license fee for that home-based business. May not require, well, A is may not require for a business that only operates occasionally or an individual who's under 18. So photography, we still could require a business license for home-based businesses. So we do have that ability still, but we're not allowed to charge. And I think we've done the exact opposite. We said we're not going to require the business license so you can operate it without it. However, if you want one, we are going to charge. So my proposal is to help us be compliant with what's here, add a single line item to the fee schedule for home-based businesses, and I'll leave it to staff to administratively determine how this should be worded, but the gist of it is I would like to see us add a single line item that says, for a home-based business that is not required by city or state code to operate with a business license, yet they still request one, we do not charge, we have a $0 item for that fee. As a separate item, I would like to see us go back and modify our code so that we still require the business license, because I think the city has a benefit to know who's operating what kind of business in the city and where it's at, so we know where to watch for problems. So I would like this to still capture that, but that's a change to code, not just a quick change to the fee structure. So that's a separate item. So my question, very long-winded, would adding that single line item help with compliance with what we have here in the scenario I laid out?
Yes, that is definitely something that is appropriate for the staff to review. I think it would be wise to have us to draft a language that we can guarantee complies with the statute, both whether we're requiring the license and whether or not we require it to have any cost at all. I think it would be wise to allow us time to review those closely with the statute, make sure it complies. I don't know if that would be something we could have appropriately done tonight on a motion.
So the second part, going back and making sure all of our codes compliant, obviously no, we can't do that. But tonight, I believe we could pass that and add an additional line item for zero impact business license fee, is the $0. So that's what I would be proposing we add tonight, that low or no impact based business fee, $0 on our schedule. So at least those who need the license can request it and not have to pay that fee. So thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilman McConaughey. I would not be opposed to creating that $0 voluntary business license, but I also would like to look at having a required business license, even if we cannot charge for it. Because if we have a business license and they sign a contract that says we understand what the rules are for operating this business to make it low or no impact to our neighborhood, then they know what those are required, and we have a paper that says they understand what the requirements are, and we can make sure they follow those requirements and not create a hazard or an impact to their neighborhood. And it'd be nice if we charge. And then on the second part, on the amusement games or machines, whichever it is, the only thing I want to keep in mind is economic development moves quickly, and if we take 2 months, I don't know if he'll, I don't know, I haven't talked to him, if he would still be here in 2 months or if he would just go to another city because he's ready to move. I don't know the answer to that, so that's something why I would like to do something now on a short term, but follow through with this with the Zions Bank later and maybe modify it twice.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Business license fees are something I've been looking at, and I'm glad that staff is having a study done. I'm fine with either of those recommendations about the zero fee business license, because there are businesses like Chad's business where you need a business license to secure insurance, and our fees are outdated as it relates to that. And I'm not saying that they need to be increased or what have you. I'm just simply saying we charge I think a $3 per employee charge, which most other cities don't do. They've gone to disproportionate fees. You brought up a great example, Councilmember Burton, with the amusement, $25 a machine, which is antiquated fees in my opinion. So I would be fine with those. I don't know if you want, I mean, I'm hearing that you want to do those tonight, knowing that within a couple months we're going to have a study back on what the cost of actually issuing a business license is in 2018. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Councilmember Whitelock.
Mr. Dodd, did you say it was going to be 2 months and I missed it? Did you give a time?
When I spoke with Mr. Murray today, he said his understanding was it was going to be done within a matter of a couple months.
Okay. Okay. Well, here's my...
Sorry, that was the $12,000 you approved the council approved in December. I know Mr. Piper's been working with that individual. Can you help share with the council how long that might take at this point? Did she indicate how long her study would take to conclude?
I believe it's 12 to 14 weeks, a little bit longer than 2 months, but that was my understanding.
And the start date?
As soon as the contract's signed.
So she hasn't, okay, it hasn't started. Okay.
I might suggest, as a way of sort of the analogy, the temporary zoning ordinance concept, if you want to set tonight a goal of trying to accommodate this gentleman's needs to act in this city quickly, if we identified, we leave our current code amount of $25 up to 20 slot machines. I don't know that they're not slot machines. Machines. That's why our vice people need to check. The machines up to 20, that would be a $500 cap. After the study comes back, if your motion included a determination that 500 was excessive, that the city manager could hear an appeal directly and refund the difference. So what I'm suggesting is you're not going to be able to recover more. If the study comes back and says the cap should be 1,000, we're going to be out $500. But if it comes back and says it's $400 and they've paid the $500 under protest, I will make arrangements to make sure they get $100 back.
Okay, so in light of that, I certainly want to bring business to West Jordan, so I'm not opposed to that, but here's my issue. We have an agenda that's published, and we have supplementary documentation that is also available on the website, and none of this is on there. So it makes me very uncomfortable that we're wanting to make all these changes for two reasons. There could be someone in the public that would want to address it. We didn't give them the opportunity. And number two, we have all this staff, and we're not really letting them do their job, in my opinion. Because in my opinion, how this should go is, oh, we're discussing fees, great. I have this concern, I'd like us to look at fees, and then as a body, we give direction to staff to bring that back. So I'm really struggling right now because I definitely want the business to come. If he wants to come, I would love to have that type of business in our city. So I guess what I'm conveying is, for that, I would be willing to do something a little bit different than what the agenda is. But as a general, I'm not willing to do that. I just don't feel it's fair to the public, and I don't feel we're being true to the agenda. So, thank you.
So did you still want to make a motion?
Nope.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt the revised uniform fee schedule effective January 25th, 2018 with the following two changes. Change number one, the section for mechanical amusement devices would be capped at $500. Number two, under business license fees, we add an item for home-based occupation not requiring licensing for $0.
Second for discussion.
Alan, was that you? We have a motion and a second. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Whitelock.
So I will have to vote against that motion because it goes one step farther than I said I was willing to go. I don't think there's an emergency issue about the business licenses. I think we have time to get more information, have it on the agenda with the supplementary documentation, and then discuss that item. So I'll have to vote no because the motion went too far.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, with regard to the cap for the mechanical amusement device for whatever the machines happen to be, based on what I saw just doing research with other cities around the valley, I'd be hard-pressed to think that we're going to be found to be justified in collecting nearly $4,000 in business licensing fees for an arcade type of business. So I don't have any hesitation putting it to what I think would be more reasonable, and it's still at the high end of what everybody else collects. If for some reason we do hear back that even $500 is too high, we can adjust it down lower, or if they for some reason do come back and say it's not enough, then at least we have the logic and the justification to put it where it should be. But again, that seems to be not likely. And I think I'll leave my comments at that for now. Thank you.
Let me ask Councilmember Burton a question, I guess. How long ago did this take place that the fellow came in?
I was contacted this week.
This week?
And then I have spoken with Scott Langford about it, and I spoke with Paul, and I've spoken with the attorneys, and we tried to get a hold of business licensing, but Marcia is off today. And so I've tried to get a lot of information, and I've spoke with the Chamber of Commerce, and you can see we've contacted several cities. So I got that information Monday, and I've done this work since Monday. So that's the window. It's a short window.
So is he still willing to open a business here in West Jordan? Have things changed?
I don't know that. I didn't ask him that question because I haven't spoken to him since yesterday. And I didn't know I was going to do this until I saw what the other cities were, and I thought, wow, we need to do something. So until then, and I didn't invite him here because I didn't know I was going to be doing this until 5 o'clock today.
Yeah, well, your name's next on the list here, so did you want to say some more?
I did. I wanted to say something about the business licensing. I am also one of those that required business licensing for not only for insurance, but for my Doppel license. I had to have a business license. So I have 2 business licenses in the city that according to state law, I'm not required to have, but according to the state, I'm required to have. So I purchased both those licenses, and I paid for them, and it wasn't bad. It was $40 a license, so I paid $80 for the license. So changing this to zero, the only reason I like this idea is because a lot of people who have home-based businesses don't use that for their income, and they don't make a decent amount of money, and that's just an expense that they make that keeps them from enjoying whatever they're doing, like the Chads, not this Chad, but Chad Nichols. They do it. The other Chad. They don't make that much money. So I don't see that as a big change. It's just dropping the price from 40 to 0 is what it is, because they can still obtain their license. But I do want to follow up and make sure that we start requiring those licenses even for people who don't make money and keep it at 0. And I think this is a step to get us to that point. So that's why I would be in favor of that.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. This will be quick.
Thank you.
Clarification based on what Councilmember Burton said, where he talked about having to renew 2 of his licenses and it was $80. We have the $40 business license fee, but if it's the first time you're getting a business license, we also charge a development service administrative fee of $50. So the first time through for one license, you're paying $90, and then subsequently $40. So I wanted to add clarification to the record that when I made the motion with $0 fee for that, that also kind of implied that there was no business development administrative fee or whatever it was associated with that. So if anyone caught the discrepancy, me saying $90 for a single business license, Councilmember Burton saying $80 for 2, that the business admin fee, that's why. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Whitelock.
So we're saying that we should have staff do work and not have payment for it. Is that correct? Because staff is going to have to create the business license. They're going to have to do whatever documentation they have to, and we don't want any compensation for that. Is that correct? Yeah? Okay. I want to go on record that yes, I know the state says that, but it doesn't say we can't. It says for the business license. It doesn't say that we can't have a filing fee or something else to pay for that. I was in favor of the motion as it was, but as it is now, the original motion. So I'm okay with your changes, just not the rest.
Okay, I'm going to jump to Councilmember Jacob. Councilmember McConaughey, if you could.
Thank you, Mayor. All good points. We have a lot of positions in the city where staff spends time doing things that we don't charge for, specifically. For example, we don't charge residents to play on the grass at the park, but there is staff required to water that, to maintain the water, to mow the lawns. For example, we have a lot of things in the city that we don't directly charge for. So it would be very interesting if we went to a completely fee-based monetary system in the city, or service model or whatever, and didn't charge property taxes, but only charged fees. So you have, $100 fee for the roads and, $75 fee for the whatever. You get what I mean. There's just a lot of things where we don't charge specifically for the cost of staff to do things. I'm very grateful the attorneys don't charge us for the time that they need to prepare all of our motions, and staff, well, not individually and not per page or anything like that, which I'm grateful for. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. I wasn't sure I was going to be in favor of the motion, but I think for the most part it's gotten to a place where I can support it. Thanks.
There's been quite a bit of discussion with this particular motion that's out there, so I think I'm going to end the discussion and vote.
Mayor Riding.
No.
Councilmember Whitelock.
No.
Councilmember Anderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb.
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Aye.
Councilmember Burton.
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Vote passes 5-2 in favor.
Okay, public hearing item 9C, receive public input and consider for approval ordinance 18-05, amending the 2009 West Jordan Municipal Code, Title 13, zoning regulations, Chapter 18, urban forestry. City of West Jordan applicant, Brian Plague.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The text amendment before you tonight was presented in a public hearing on June 28th in front of Council of 2017. We were directed at that time to bring it back second meeting in January of 2018, which is why we're here today. And the intent of this text amendment is to allow the Parks and Urban Forester to better maintain the public trees to the best health of the tree, which will ensure a more mature urban forest throughout the city for future years to come. We are also establishing standards as we speak for the beautification of the city and further public's general welfare. I've had a few questions from a few council members. This isn't, we're not going to be going out looking for private tree issues. This is just another tool in our pocket. When those issues arise, we have the backing through this ordinance. Currently, there is no ordinance, so it's very cumbersome when we have to go into, for example, the 70th South trees. When they shifted the lanes over, trucks and bigger semis and stuff were being damaged from the trees overhanging the road. It took a day or two to get the proper paperwork in hand to have staff go out and trim those trees up while trucks and vehicles were being damaged. So that's the real intent of this ordinance. So I'll leave it over to you guys, turn it over to you guys now, and let me know if you have any further questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Are there any questions for staff? Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Brian, for taking my questions earlier and have another one now. So let's suppose that this is my big concern is private property. On this private property, there's a tree that has a disease, and this disease is bad and will go and affect other private properties and public property. Without this, if we don't pass this, what is your course to get that tree removed?
We don't have any recourse right now, and if I always use the emerald ash borer. It's coming to Utah. It's going to go throughout the United States. It's going to take out all the ash trees eventually. If we don't have anything in place, we're dead in the water. The state forester's office will be there to advise, but they won't do anything either. So there's potential we can have some hazard trees around that need to be taken care of.
Okay, so without this, we can't do anything other than inform the people and hope they do something on their own?
Correct.
So if we pass this, then what tool will you have to remove that tree?
We would work with the resident if we found a hazard tree. We're not going to go out. We're not going out looking for issues on private trees. We've got enough. We've got 13,000 plus trees that we have to maintain right now. We're not going to go look for issues, but if there are issues, we would have this to back us up to help the resident through our code enforcement process. They'll be involved. We have due process with the code enforcement process.
So you would be required to notify the resident prior to doing anything. And is there an appeal built into this if the resident wanted to appeal?
We have an appeal process built into the city code.
Thank you. It looks like Mr. Bricky would like to say something.
Respectfully, Brian's correct. Under the current codes that we have, we don't have any way to affect change. We could resort to the old-fashioned expensive lawsuit, something of a nuisance claim you'd have to file. But I'm telling you, the process to solve the problem through the court system, all the trees in the neighborhood would be dead.
Okay, because when you mentioned be cumbersome, it doesn't bother me that it's cumbersome for the government to go in and take someone's tree in most cases, but there may be some cases, and I'm not sure, and that's what I'm getting at. So you answered my questions, where we are now and where this would be in it. So thank you.
Hold on, I think there's a comment on that too.
Thank you, Paul.
Obviously, under the Constitution, anyone's property, we can't take their property without due process. A tree would constitute property, and the code has built in a section to allow due process where we would have to notify them. Obviously, the intent and the hope would be that we work together and help them, and they go forward and do what's necessary to take care of the issue. If we had a citizen that refused to do anything about it, and with that notice under the abatement process, we could also then give them another notice that they are in violation, that we are going to abate the tree. They could then file an appeal to do that, but that appeal process is much faster. They could come and have a hearing as that with our administrative law judge, and we could have that determined and decided within a matter of weeks instead of months or years if we went through the legal system in the courts. So it does allow for due process. It does allow for a right to be heard. It does allow for a hearing, all required under this Constitution.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure there was an appeal process there, because we always think that it's the homeowner that's making the mistake, but sometimes the city makes a mistake, and I wanted to thank you.
Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I was obviously was on the council when we discussed this back in June, and there was a concern about taking a private property. A couple questions that I had, and I don't know if Paul or you, Brian, could answer these. I'm in my printed packet, page 149, Title 13-18-5, consent required. And it just talks about with city-owned trees, I guess, well, city-owned tree or causing such acts to be done by others without first obtaining the written consent of the urban forester is prohibited. So is it the urban forester then that would be the lone person to decide what to do with the tree, or is there an approval process that goes through you, so it's signed by both, or more than just one person?
Yes, the urban forester works under the direction of the parks director, and I work very close with Ty on this. Or any urban forester.
So when it says without first obtaining the written consent of the urban forester is prohibited, I'm assuming the urban forester would check on, I mean, you would have discussion over which city trees that needed to be removed, and it wouldn't be just a single employee that would decide which trees to remove.
Correct.
Okay, and I don't know, is that adequate language for that, or?
Well, on that one, it's a city-owned tree, so technically there's not a due process violation for any individual in the city.
Right. I guess my question though is, and I don't know, maybe it's more philosophical, but do we have just single people making decisions on stuff that affect the city that don't go before the council on city property? I mean, I'm not going to argue to surplus a tree, but I mean, when we surplus property in the city, it comes before the council, and I'm not saying that we have to decide up on the council the disposal of trees, but I'm just wondering, is it a single person act?
Well, obviously that's a policy consideration for the council. There are decisions sometimes that are made in the city that are done by a single person for certain values that have been set. Like, for example, procurement. There are some procurement decisions that are less than $5,000 that are made by our procurement officer without, I mean, obviously there are, I'm sure he runs things by his supervisor, et cetera, but ultimately under our code he would have the authority to make that decision for those values. So there are certain situations where individuals have been given authority to make decisions under certain values, and that would be for the council to decide whether they agree with that, that decision, to provide that decision to be made.
Okay. And I'm appreciative of the efforts to do this, and I'm going to just share a quick story, because I had a flowering pear tree in my yard at my old house, and it developed fire blight. And a neighbor of mine who knew trees, I didn't. To me, it's just a pretty tree. He was concerned that the fire blight, which is a bacteria, would spread to his tree. And we didn't involve the city or the county where I lived. I just said, fine, it's only got 2 live branches on it anyway, so I cut the tree down. And he was advising me, I got to bleach my saw and bleach a bunch of stuff to make sure it didn't affect his trees, because he had fruit trees in his yard, and that was kind of a hobby. And so I'm very familiar with how that can affect, and fire blight is something that can actually affect an entire orchard in one season. And so, I'm grateful that we have some tools, but I'm also extremely sensitive for due process of private property, and that we're not just going on to property saying, hey, you've got fire blight or some other disease, and we're going to take your tree. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. this is directed towards staff and for Brian. So I guess the question for me would be, besides the 70th South trimming, was there anything else previously in the past year that kind of triggered this as far as needing this amendment?
Not that I can think of offhand. We're in the growing months. We get several calls from residents where Ty responds to go out and look at. They'll call him for a tree concern. We try not to get involved with those because they're civil issues, and that's how we treat them. We've had incidences where regulatory signs have been blocked, causing a stop sign to be blocked. People are blowing the stop sign or running the stop sign. In those cases, we work with the city attorney's office to get the permission and the waiver to go on their property, and we'll help them prune their tree. And it's pruned properly and like a professional. It's not just a chop job.
Right.
We've got experienced staff that knows what they're doing too. So, no, the reason we're bringing this forward is because we don't have anything. We have nothing right now. And we need something in our toolbox for this.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. One quick question. Is section in this 13-18-6, is that superfluous considering what is in 13-18-10, section E, paragraph 4, for those of you that don't have this in front of you, Section 6 says if the tree conflicts with the sidewalk, every effort will be made to preserve the tree while fixing the sidewalk. And so Section E4 of Section 10 says the city shall have the authority to prune any tree or shrub on private property when it interferes with the pedestrian use of a sidewalk, for example. So I get that it's talking about two different occurrences. One is like a bush overgrowing the sidewalk. One is the roots pushing up a sidewalk, but it's kind of the same thing. Do we need both of those paragraphs in there? For one, I like making laws as short as possible. That's the first thing, and I'll ask that before I ask the second.
I think we do, because there's certain incidences that we get called out on and working with code enforcement where the improper tree has been planted in an improper spot. That's key. I mean, we all know that. To where it's lifting the sidewalk. We always try to work with the resident to root prune before they cut down a big mature tree and get the roots below the surface to kind of train them to go deeper and then repair the sidewalk. But there have been incidences where it's raised the sidewalk, the tree is in decline or dead, where the tree has been removed. And most of the time, the homeowners take care of them, but we have assisted with, we're home with a good neighbor, so we try to assist when we can. But yeah, I think they both need to be in there, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. My second question is more of a concern, really, and the 14th Amendment notwithstanding, whenever any law or proposed ordinances give a lot of authority to a single individual, granted, we have a administrative law process, we have a code enforcement process, but they're not referenced in this code. This code simply says the urban forester can do whatever he dang well pleases for the most part. I mean, not those words, but for the most part, that's kind of what's in here. And I understand that we currently have this other process, we have this administrative law process, we have this code enforcement process, we will go through these, trust us, wink, wink. We don't have to write it in here. I'd rather it be referenced in here somewhere.
In the -13, it does reference the code enforcement, and that would be the process and how it's enforced. Yeah. So that would incorporate all the city code related to code enforcement and abatement, which outlines all the other due process requirements.
And see, this is why I like laws to be as short as possible, so I don't have to read all the way down to the bottom. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for staff? At this time, I will open the public hearing. Is there anyone from the community who would like to address the council on this issue? So please come forward. Seeing none, I will close the public comments at this time and come back to council. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the reasons government exists is to protect and preserve the property rights of the people whom the government serves. As a homeowner with a number of trees on my property, I want to make sure my property rights are protected, and should there be a neighbor who has something that could potentially damage my property, I'd like knowing that there is a process by which my rights to have my property can be protected. So I'm very much in favor of this and would move to approve ordinance 18-05.
I'll second, and I'm not Councilmember McConaughey's neighbor. With
We
the
have
fire-blighted tree.
a motion by Councilmember McConaughey and a second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion to the motion. Councilmember Whitelock.
While I really like trees, and I have several in my yard, I feel some of the things that have been brought up are correct. I feel that it's a property issue. I feel that it goes a little too far, and I'm not comfortable with the power that it seems to give to one person. So again, I have to vote no, just because I understand Councilmember McConaughey's, that he wants his trees protected also, but when I'm giving authority to someone to go on to somebody else's property and cut down their trees, tell them they have to cut down their trees or we're going to do it for you and send you a bill. I'm just not comfortable with the depth of this. Perhaps we do need something, but I think this ordinance goes a little too far and has a little bit too much in it. As Councilmember Jacobs said, it's really long. I'm not sure that to accomplish what we needed on 70th South, which is the problem. And for me, when we're going to codify something, we need to know what was the problem that we're trying to solve. And if that was the problem, trees on 70th South, this is a lot to solve that problem.
Councilmember Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. Having this come back the second time, the first time, if we had voted on it then, I would have voted against it. But with the reassurances that I have received today and prior to today, and sharing some time with Brian and others on this, I will be voting in favor of this today.
Thank you. Let's vote.
Councilmember Jacob?
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey?
Aye.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock?
No.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Mayor Riding?
Yes.
Vote passes 6-1 in favor.
We'll now move to our discussion item. Business item 10A, discussion of possible action regarding resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a contract with Ace Disposal for solid waste collection for the city of West Jordan. David Bricky.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. At this point, I'd like to allow both Paul Dodd, Justin Stoker, to perhaps give some background on both the RFP process. Once it went out, there was a determined couple mistakes were made that needed to be corrected in the way questions were asked. I don't know if that's clear to everyone here tonight, and maybe not even on the dais. So I'd like them to explain how they got to the point where the scoring occurred, the results then determined, and then how we end up here tonight. I realize that may not answer all of your questions. We've been trying to answer as many as we have been seeing sent to us, both in the legal department and in my office. If we have not answered them, we need to. I mean, I acknowledge this is a large contract. This is a big obligation that the community expects the city to provide. You need to have confidence in who that person is, that entity, if you will, that will be providing this service. So if I can ask those two gentlemen to weigh in at this point.
Thank you. Paul?
Yes, so I hope most of the council, or all the council are aware, this is the second time this RFP has come before the council. The first time the RFP was issued in the summer of last year, 2017, and during that RFP process, we ultimately ended up only having one responsive bidder for a 5-year term contract at that time. When the RFP came before the council, I believe in October of 2017, for the council's vote to decide to approve that, the council had some issues with whether or not there was enough competition in that bid process, and whether or not we could do anything to fix that RFP and have more competition. And so the council decided to direct staff to reject all bids and issue a new RFP and try to give some specific directions as to how we can try to get more competition and more responsive bids. We were hoping to get more than 2, but at least we redid the RFP, and it did accomplish the council's directive to somewhat, since we did have 2 responsive bids on this new RFP. We were hoping to have more, but we can't control who decides to bid on a project or not. But we did have 2 responsive bids on this one, and we took a lot of steps to try to make sure that this RFP process, that the scoring was objective and transparent, that the parties would know how it was scored, that they would be able to understand how it was scored. I believe we accomplished that goal in doing that. The RFP was graded, and we have now, obviously the scoring was close. Both sides submitted good proposals that were very close, and the scoring was very close. And based on the scoring of the RFP by the committee, the recommendation has been made for the council to consider the approval of a contract with ACE, who had the highest score in the RFP process. I know the council's had a lot of questions. I know if you have any further questions for me or for Mr. Stoker, we would love to address those at this time.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council? Councilmember Burton.
I actually have a comment I wanted to make. I want to say I have probably spent more time on this agenda item for this meeting than any other agenda item that's on here. And I'm still not, still don't know how I'm going to vote right now. I'm not opposed to either one of these companies having the contract. My main concern is that it's done fairly and done properly. And I'm sure that either or company would supply and provide what we need for our needs here. And it's been really challenging for me, and I would like to hear some more thoughts from some of the other council members to give myself another minute to make my decision how I'm going to vote. But thank you each for submitting your proposals and being willing to serve us here in West Jordan. And we know both of you have ties with West Jordan, and we appreciate those ties. And some of you have more history than the other, and we appreciate that as well. And I will be quiet. Thank you.
Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, similar comments to Councilmember Burton as far as the folks who came out and bid on the contract. Been very happy with the service that we've had so far. Been very happy with my interactions with Waste Management as well. That said, I do have a lot of frustration with the process. To go back a little bit further in history than what Mr. Dodd went, where he talked about this being the second time this particular contract has come, I want to go back to 2012, my first year on the council. I was the council's liaison on the solid waste committee that went through the proposal, went through the RFP process, and we had similar issues then. We issued a request for quote instead of a request for proposal. We had one bidder that came back, and their price would have been lower, except because they had also included a recycling rebate. But because our request for quote didn't mention a recycling rebate, we were told that could not be considered. It was technically, that portion was not really responsive, so we had to go with the other one that was a little bit more expensive. After deliberation, we said it was a mistake to go the request for quote route. We should have gone request for proposal. We had to throw everything out and do it again. Now that we're doing a new contract, we've seen a similar mistake again, and I'm frustrated that we didn't learn from history. The bulk of my frustration is with how the process has been done. This time around, we did not have a council representative on that selection committee. And that's incredibly aggravating to me. I've raised my voice about this in other scenarios before, but have been told that the term used was conflict of interest, because the city council gets to decide on a contract when it comes to us. So to have us on the selection committee, it's kind of a chance to double our influence. Well, my frustration, this is the perfect case to show my frustration, because in the end, a selection was made based on criteria, some of which I don't care about. Whether it's a 5-minute response time or a 60-minute response time to let us know about missed cans, I really don't care. And had the council had an opportunity to be involved, I'm not sure that would have been one of the selection criteria. The other item is the age of the vehicles. I really don't know what the age of the vehicles does to improve the service. If there are concerns about aesthetics, we could write something like that into the contract, and in fact we have. If it's the concern that older vehicles make more noise, then we could have said there's a noise requirement with it. But having those two items seem somewhat arbitrary to me. The other item was the GPS tracking capabilities. The conversations that we had with our fleet department when we talked about putting GPS trackers on our vehicles, they're very low in cost and something that could be easily done after the fact. I worry that maybe seeing that GPS requirement would encourage folks to do something that that makes them acquire a vehicle of a higher cost when we come to find out we can't even use the system. And anyway, my point is the council should have been involved in this. It's a large dollar contract and we were not included. And A, we saw an issue the first time the contract went out again because it caused only one person to respond, so there was something wrong with it. And B, the second time, we really didn't have a chance to say, these are the factors that are important to us as a city. We should have had the opportunity to discuss the tree pickup. Is this something we want to continue? Is this something that we want to change? The neighborhood cleanup bins. The other frustration, again, my frustration that I'm going to voice here has nothing to do with the folks from ACE that are here. But my frustration is primarily with the prior council. We said we want to see additional neighborhood cleanup dumpsters. So we saw that, but when that came and we said we want to double the number of dumpsters, okay, great, we're also increasing the price to go along with that. I could understand an increase for the price for the additional dumpsters, but to increase on the base that was already part of the contract, I didn't like that. This is where we had some good conversation, Paul Dodd and I, where, well, let me pause for a second. The second item is when ACE came to us and said, there's been a change in the market for the recycling rebate. We want to be excused from that portion of the contract. Both of those I really do not like. I do not like changing the terms of the contract after the contract's in effect. So I spoke with Mr. Dodd saying, I'm questioning if this is really a responsive, responsible bidder because we've seen the contract terms request to be changed. And the response was, well...
Excuse me.
Well...
Anything he would have said would have gone attorney-client privilege.
Okay, so I should not have said that out loud.
Don't recite what he said. If you want to have the council release him of that, you'd have to vote.
Okay.
So you can indicate what you said, please.
Okay, that's duly noted. Duly noted. The point was that the conversations with him, my understanding of what the legal terminology is, my understanding where I was suggesting that perhaps this is not a responsive, responsible bid was not legally defensible. That's kind of what I was getting to. My definition didn't match with the legal definition. So I find myself in a position where I'm trying to figure out what is the right thing to do. We have two groups who have jumped through the hoops repeatedly and responded to the bid that we requested, and we have a selection committee that said this is the one that you need to go with. But then we have an obligation to make sure we're spending the taxpayer dollar judiciously and appropriately, and I'm not sure the process got us to that outcome. So I'm left scratching my head thinking, what is really the appropriate thing to do? I'm not happy with the process, and I'm really frustrated there. So I'm, like Councilmember Burton again, I share that same thought where I'm on the fence and not really sure but I wanted you guys to know the thought process that I had and know the history that, again, 6 years ago, I can't tell you how many hours I spent on this. It's probably well over 100 hours spent on this the first time through. And to find ourselves repeating similar mistakes is incredibly aggravating. So I'll release the floor for other comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. This reminds me of a Friends episode, and if you'll indulge me for a minute, my wife and I are huge Friends fans. And there's this episode where the two guys that live across the hall and the two girls that live on the other side of the apartment, or the other apartment across the hall, are arguing over a game where if the one side wins, they get to switch apartments. And the girl who doesn't live in either apartment comes up and says, "Oh, okay, I have a game. First of all, tell me what you like about trees." And the one team, the girls, I think, say, "Oh, they're green." And she says, "Oh, good answer, 5 points." And the other guy says, "Oh, I like them because they're tall." And she goes, "Oh, 2 points. Both good answers, but we were going for leafy." And then one of the girls says, "This isn't a game." And the other girl says, "Shh, we're winning." And my point here in reciting this, and your Friends fan like me, you'll get it. My point in saying this is, it's important for us to look at the process and not just the result. It'd be really tempting for the winning side here to say, "Of course you did everything right, we won." And for the losing side to say, "Of course you did everything wrong, we lost." So it's important for us to forget who you are. Forget how many of you are here. Forget who spoke during public comment and who didn't, and who called me and who didn't. And look at the rules of the game that have been presented to us, and whether or not the rules were correct, and whether or not the rules were applied correctly that were laid out. I have a little bit of a problem, similar to what Councilmember McConaughey said, with the way the game was laid out. The arbitrary, what do you like about trees? I don't think that this is necessarily the best way to evaluate who's going to be the best provider for the city. And with that in mind, I get the optics. I get what we're looking at. I understand that that if we went back to the drawing board, it looks like, oh, well, we didn't like the results, so we're going to come up with a new game. And that's not the case either. There's no good way to do this at this point. But I agree with much of what Councilmember McConaughey said. The questions asked, I think I would like to throw a couple of them out and go off of what's left. I don't know if we can do that, rather than going back out to bid or back out to RFP or whatever. So I will leave my comments to that. I see Paul Dodge light on though. So.
Just one comment, and I understand the frustration of feeling like maybe the RFP process there wasn't enough direction from council as to what you would want to consider, what you thought was important. I do think the last RFP that we issued, all the council except for Councilman Lamb and Councilperson Whitelock, they had the opportunity to review the previous one that we did in the summer and to review that and to see what was on that previous one. And we did receive direction from the council in October as to some of the items on that one that the council wanted changed. There was specific direction by council about the length of the term of the contract. There was specific direction by council about some other things related to some of the services that a couple of members of the council really thought was important. Those items were added into the RFP. There was some direction given by council on it. If there were other items that they felt were important, obviously, in hindsight, it would have been nice if that information was provided or given to staff to include. But the ones that were addressed and provided by council, staff did everything that we could to include those and make those changes in the new RFP. And obviously, maybe that's something we need to look at going forward on these really large contracts, of having a better process of, getting better input from all the council members as to any other item they might consider as being important or valuable for them to consider. But there was input and there was consideration by
the staff to everything the council did inform us of. So that did take place. And as to, I like the analogy with the friends. I do think that in this one, it's not, in a legal term, when we would argue, we could say that there is a distinction in this one. I think that the grading in this one was known and objective, and they knew what the scores would be given for the answers provided. In your friend's analogy, no one knew what the score would be. Whether or not someone thought something could be weighted more for one thing or something can be considered for another one, everyone's going to have different opinions as to what they thought was the process. But the RFP that was done was, in my opinion, objective, fair, and did allow the bidders to understand what would be scored and how. So I do think that's important to consider.
Thank you, Paul. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I have similar frustrations, and I'm just curious, maybe from Justin or you, Paul, or even David. Question F. Well, let me go to the easy one. Question G, which is the average age of fleet collection vehicles. I don't understand how that determines a level of service. I don't understand how. That wasn't a direction, at least when I was on the council, of something that should be included in. So I'm just wondering, the easy question, then I'll get another question, but G, the average age of fleet collection, it seems to me that we're kind of dictating to a business that you've got to have really nice trucks in order to get score high on our RFP process. And I think what the citizens are looking for, and maybe a question I would have used, would have been the percentage of trucks that are natural gas or something along those lines. So I don't know which one can answer that.
So I'll take a shot there at question D. Like Mr. Dodd mentioned, we tried to make the RFP process as very objective as we possibly could and try to remove the subjective nature of the reviews, which was some of the feedback we got from the first bid proposal. In that process, we consulted a number of experts in the bidding process to try to do that, and it all kind of pointed down to this particular method. With regards to question G, there was a number of items that we were looking at that influenced that information. We were looking at a professional and clean image, the reliability of the vehicle fleet, with terms to having a breakdown in the middle of their route, making sure they contained the latest technology and they met the most recent environmental standards. And whether that's CNG or if that's Tier 4 diesel or whatever, we wanted to make sure that they were most cost-effective and environmentally responsible as possible. Now, many of those things, it's hard to put into an objective framework and measure, how environmentally responsible are you. And so in discussions we had, we decided to focus on what we could measure and pointed to the average age of the vehicle fleet as being able to meet these items, the image, the reliability, latest technology, environmental standards, could all be responded to by how old your vehicles were. It determines whether you're using Tier 4 diesel or CNG or you're using an older standard. And so a lot of these categories, even though they appear very simple and straightforward, had a lot of underlying factors to them that covered items that we felt could have been subjective if we would have brought those to the surface.
Okay, and following up with that, the scoring, the average age of 0 to 1.9 years got 8 points, 2 to 3.9 got 6 points. Is there research from diesel mechanics that suggests that a 2.5-year-old vehicle breaks down more frequently than one that's 1.9 years old?
No, not necessarily with that, but we did find that most of the vehicle fleets beyond 7 years did have a significant number of problems.
And in some of the conversations we've had with industry professionals or other providers, most people will have cycled out their vehicles by year 7. And some people even cycle them out before that. Salt Lake County cycles their vehicles out on a 4-year schedule. And so when we looked at that, we figured that the question C and question D, which pertain to the GPS and the cameras, as were mentioned earlier, are something that's fairly cheap and easy to install and doesn't really cost a lot. It's not a big deal to put that in. When we're starting to look at some of these other things like an ERP, the age of your vehicles, and the messaging service becomes a little bit more difficult. We weighed that against the costs. As I'm sure you all know, the big struggle in the public sector is balancing cost versus service. And so when we looked at how much points were worth, we looked at how much a point could have cost if it were bought effectively in the cost section of the proposal. And so where a GPS could cost $20 to put that into the truck, clearly that's not a 20-point question, and because we wanted to make sure that the points corresponded to actual dollar values so that cost versus service balanced out depending on how you're providing that. But we did consider the reliability and industry standards on how you were going to be replacing vehicles and when we were considering that point breakdown.
Okay, and I think that's going to satisfy me on G. If I may, Mayor, I just want to ask one more on question F, which is where I'm really struggling. The contractor will provide city with messaging service regarding skipped cans. And the two companies are familiar with the definition of a skipped can as opposed to a missed can, or what other terms? Is it skipped and missed, picked up?
And I think we attempted to make it very clear in the RFP that a skipped can was a can that the contractor drove up to and it didn't meet one of 3 categories. Either it was overloaded, and by trying to dump it would cause damage to the truck or spill all over the place. It was clear that it contained harmful or hazardous materials, or it wasn't within 2 feet of the curb, and so the truck couldn't get it without a driver having to go out and move the can. And so that's in our contract, we allow the contractor to skip cans in some of those circumstances, as opposed to a missed can where they just drive by for no reason. One of the struggles we have from an operational standpoint is being able to respond to residents that call us up and say, the driver drove past my can and skipped it. We have to send out one of our staff members, pull them off of an asphalt crew or a concrete crew or whatever it does, to have them drive out, look at the can, and determine why it was skipped. And we take pictures ourselves and we document the reason, and then we follow up with the resident. It's incredibly burdensome to be able to do that, where if you have the contracted hauler can, through technology in the truck or what be it, can send us that message to our front office. When that resident calls us and says, my can was skipped, we already have that message that says, your can was skipped because you had a trampoline that was sticking 12 feet above your can. That's a real scenario. And so when we looked at that question F, we didn't dig into the details on how that messaging service could be provided. We know it could be in the technology of the truck, through cameras and through route software and tablets and stuff that could be inside of that. And there's a number of companies that provide that. Or on a very rudimentary method, it could be the driver stepping out of his truck and taking a picture with his phone and emailing it. But we tried to be extremely reasonable in there, and looking at that, could a message be sent to us within 5 minutes? And we felt that was very reasonable regarding any type of technology that was used, so that we can properly respond to residents when they contact us for why their can got skipped.
Okay. And I do purchasing at my other job, my full-time job, and it's state purchasing, and I've done RFPs, I've done RFQs, I don't know, this is probably the cleanest I've seen. So, I mean, I'm saying I don't think it's the cleanest I've seen. But my guidelines with our company is that all things being equal, I've got to go with the low bid. And so is there, in your mind, what is the rationale of going with a higher bid when it looks like to me it's quicker response on the messaging and a newer fleet of vehicles?
Maybe I should answer that. What you said is correct, all things being equal, you go with the low bid. However, the state statute is really clear in the RFP process that the price cannot be the determining factor, the sole determining factor in an RFP process. We made the price worth 50% of the entire score. That, in our opinion, was the highest percentage under the state law that we feel like we could have made the price be. And the price between the two bidders is only 1.6 in difference. It's 1.6 percentage points in difference. So they are very close. So if all of the things were equal, the low price would prevail. However, the other 50 points in the RFP process have to be counted. And my understanding under state law, it's not the low bid that you have to award it to. It is the high score in the RFP. And the fact simply is, in this one, even though it was really close and the points were really close, the high score was ace. And I didn't feel as if the staff could recommend a different recommendation than what was scored.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And I just want to let both companies know that I'm appreciative that you submitted a bid and grateful for the service that you do provide. And that's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Whitelock.
So I just have to say, I think this is a perfect item that would have been better served in a work meeting. Because Councilman McConaughey brought up a good point. There are things in here that I think we need to discuss if we really even want to continue doing them. I know that 2.24 discusses a mink farm. I don't really, well, I know a lot more now because Mr. Dodd spent a lot of time with me on this issue. But, I'm not sure that that's this council body's desire to continue that. Also, glass recycling, I'd really like to know, I didn't know we did glass recycling. I didn't know we had 2 places you could take your glass in the city. So I wonder how many residents do. A cost analysis, is that really something we want to continue? So I'm a little frustrated, first because it was put off by the prior council and given to us, but then the process is a problem. I agree with Councilman McConaughey. I think one of the council members should be on the RFP. I don't really feel it's a conflict. And I would appreciate in the future that things like this would come to us before we have to vote on them, because there's so many questions that now I feel like I have to vote, and I'm getting legal counsel one way, and I'm hearing my fellow council members another way in some regards. And so now I'm torn. It's like, well, crud. I'm between a rock and a hard place. So I wish our process had been different, and I truly do think this would be a good example of a work meeting.
Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, Mayor. As I listened to all the comments, and I took some time this week, and as I got all the information to go through all this information and understand, I'm struggling to see how this wasn't a fair process. I've heard that said a few times. This is the second time we've gone through this. I was not part of the council over the first round, but from my understanding, that first process wasn't fair. So here we are on round 2. So now there's another thought that maybe this wasn't fair again, and that ACE shouldn't be awarded this. However, from my experience of doing some of these RFPs in the Parks Committee, whenever we were given these RFP scoring sheets for certain things that the Parks Department did, those of us who had these RFPs didn't ever have any information about which was better than the other. We went through the scoring sheets, we scored them, we gave them back to the Parks Department, and then it was awarded. I never made that choice. It was made through the scoring system through several people that did this. It's difficult for me because I do like both companies. I've lived in West Jordan in my home for almost 18 years now, and Ace has been the main provider of my garbage, and I haven't once had a problem with them. I like Waste Management. They have a facility here in our city. But as you look through the scoring here, and for those of you who can't see it, Ace won the RFP by about 3 points. So as we're going through this process, I'm not sure that I want to go through another round of RFPs again, because once again, it won't be fair that time either. So I just wanted to, as my vote goes on tonight, I'm going to go by what the RFP has shown me. Not saying that the other company's bad, not saying the other company's better, but the RFP has given us a blueprint of what we can vote on, and I feel it's been a fair process in that way. Thank you.
Before we go to Councilmember Jacob, I'm going to jump in here since if I push my button, it just turns it off. But throughout my entire working life, having been in construction and other issues, we have gone through the bidding process. I've gone through the bidding process, the RFP process, the RFQ process. Once that RFP, in this case, goes out, that's what everybody responds to. You respond to it with your best possible answers to everything that's in that RFP process. When the RFP comes back and it's graded, if you will, the committee goes through and does their grading on that and adds up the points. Everybody had the same RFP. If they had questions, they were able to get those questions answered. But the fact is that the RFP went out. Everybody answered it to the best way they possibly could. And then that came back and it was scored. And that's what the scoring is right now. And right now, from the city standpoint, this is my opinion, that's the way it is. The scoring came back based on the best possible answers and proposals that came in from the companies. So with that being said, I'll go to Councilmember Jacob, who's on here.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have just one more question that was spawned by some of the other comments. I have several questions, but I'm just going to leave it, boil it down to one, because this one question will kind of let me know if this would change the way I would vote on that. And that is, you're right. Everybody was given the same document. Everybody had the opportunity to ask questions if something was unclear, and then everybody responds with their best answer. But if both parties feel a question is clear, but read it a different way, we may not be getting apples to apples. Does that make sense? For example, if I asked a question like, let's go with the actual one. I don't want to come up with a hypothetical. No Friends analogies this time. It's question G on the average age of vehicles. Average age, so I read through the RFP. It's almost exactly how Justin described what they were looking for and why average age of vehicles was something that they were concerned about. Please provide the number and average age of the collection trucks that will be assigned to service West Jordan. I'm wondering if that is the average age of the trucks on day one. Is it the average age of the trucks over the lifetime of the contract? What about is it the current fleet? Like I said, day one, the anticipated fleet. What about trucks that they've ordered but are not yet in service, but would be in service when the contract starts? Or maybe they won't be when the contract starts, but they will be 3 months later. Does that make sense? Somebody may have done the math on, this is the trucks I have right now. My average age of my current fleet right now is 4.9 or 2.1 or whatever the numbers were. I don't have them in front of me. Somebody else may have said, I know when the contract starts, I've got 15 trucks on order. They're going to be here, or they're going to be here 6 months in, or over the life of the contract, I cycle mine out every 2 years, so I know they'll never be more than 2 years old. Whatever it is, there's not necessarily an apples-to-apples answer on this particular question. Does that make sense? Is there a way to determine? I guess they're both here. We could ask them, but I don't want to do that. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, so I think the first thing you understand is that this question is not the entirety of the RFP.
Right, but the answer to this question does cover the difference between the two scores. So if this question was scored differently, this one question, or if it was thrown out.
No, you're not understanding what I'm saying. the RFP itself had more explanations prior to getting, so what you're looking at here is just the scoring portion of the RFP. There was numerous pages in the RFP previously that detailed things that we were expecting, things that we wanted, other explanations, definitions, all types of other things. And what you're referring to is just the scoring section. If you go to and look at the other parts of the RFP, there is more explanation of that. And then, so that's the first part. The second part is, I do think the question itself is clear as far as average age of fleet collection vehicles assigned to West Jordan. If someone answered the question thinking, I'm going to answer it with the average age of fleet vehicles that I have in my company, they don't read the English language well, because it says assigned to West Jordan. And that means the vehicles they are going to assign to the city of West Jordan for this contract specifically. We're talking about a company with Waste Management that has, I don't know how many thousands upon thousands of trucks throughout the entire United States. Pretty sure they didn't take an average of all the thousands and thousands of trucks they have throughout the United States. So I do think the question is clear, but I do think it's a kind of a dangerous process to go in and try to say, well, maybe they thought this, or maybe they thought that, or maybe someone thought that. We haven't even had any input from anybody that I'm aware of. I've spoken to both parties. No one's told me they were confused on that question. I've spoken, they had an opportunity to ask any questions on anything that they thought was, not clear. And not only that, I think this is something all the council should be aware of. Not only do they have an opportunity to ask questions, prior to the bids being submitted or the due date of the bids being submitted, either side also has an opportunity to actually object to the RFP itself. If they feel there's something in the RFP that is not following the RFP statute, if they feel there's something in the RFP that's not legal, before they even have to submit their proposals, they have the opportunity to actually object to the RFP and how it's done. That never happened either. So I think that's something the council needs to take into account as well. If they felt there was something inherently unjust or unfair about the RFP as written, that should have been objected to prior to the proposals being submitted. And that didn't take place.
Okay. With that in mind, I appreciate your answers. I am looking at the entire RFP, not just the scoring sheet. When I went to the section on average age of vehicles, it's on page, I don't know what page this is. My PDF doesn't want to tell me. It's on page 12 and 13. It bleeds over. Also, the point about average age of trucks assigned to West Jordan, you're right. And that's, maybe I didn't specify that in my question or in my comment. I am, just the trucks involved in the question, my concern is not the number of trucks used in the calculation. It's it's which trucks are included in the calculation. So yes, the ones assigned to West Jordan, but the ones assigned to West Jordan today, the ones assigned to West Jordan on day one, the ones assigned to West Jordan, the average over the life of the contract, because I cycle mine out every 3 years, so mine will have an average age over the course of 3 years that is lower than somebody who cycles it out every 6 years. Although right now, those average ages might be different. Does that make sense? So what I'm saying is I don't know what calculations either party used. To make this
if I may, I think I have
and it would be dangerous for me to assume that they both use the same idea on this.
To try to answer your question, we sat down and we did our very best to try to anticipate every possible way that these questions could be interpreted. And we put crazy amounts of detail and attempted to try to provide clarification in there that was beyond what would normally be in the process. We went into details regarding what could be considered a residential home and what could be considered local service. And we did our very best to try to provide as much detail and clarification regarding those. It's impossible to try to anticipate every possible scenario that other people can think of. But we do have the process in the RFP where people can ask questions, and we rely upon that. If for some reason we missed something, if we left something that was vague or ambiguous, there is that question that says, did you mean the average age in the middle of the contract or the beginning of the contract? That would have been an excellent question to propose prior to the bid closing, and we could have responded to that. When it really comes down to it, we did our very best to try to provide as fair and clear a process as possible. We allowed the people to submit questions if there was any questions. We responded to them promptly and did everything we possibly could to make this a fair and clear process for everybody.
And I appreciate that, and I hope this doesn't sound like I'm ripping on staff or that I'm upset with what we ended up with. I'm just coming up with the questions that I would have may not be the questions that were asked, and the questions that I do have may not have answers. And so, in this particular case, if I was either company, I probably wouldn't have asked for clarification on this because I would have had, oh, this is obvious what they mean. But maybe it's not. I'm just throwing up a reasonable doubt, and I don't know if it's legal for us to disqualify a question and add up what's left. I don't know if we can do that without tossing out the whole thing and starting over, which I really don't want to do. So that's where I'm sitting right now. I don't know that I can endorse the RFP at this point with the questions that I still have. So I'll leave that out there right now.
Councilmember Lamb.
I'll just turn it off. Well, let yours go. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve business item 10A regarding a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a contract with Ace Disposal for solid waste collection for the city of West Jordan.
I'll second that. Discussion of the motion. Seeing none, let's vote.
Councilmember Jacob?
No.
Mayor Whiting?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Councilmember Whitelock?
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey?
No.
Vote passes 5-2 in favor.
Thank you. We'll now move to our closed session, strategy session, to discuss purchase, exchange, or lease of real property, including any form of water right or water shares. I will entertain a motion to go into closed session and adjourn from there. Councilmember McConaughey.
Thank you, Mayor. Could we do remarks prior if we're going to be adjourning from there?
Sure.
I should have put it last year.
You can do remarks now, and then we'll adjourn into the closed session after remarks.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to voice a little bit of frustration. Earlier in tonight's meeting, there was a very pointed question directed at me, and I was not given the opportunity to respond. It framed my my position in a derogatory light, and I feel it mischaracterized my point of view, and I take exception that I wasn't given an opportunity to respond to that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other remarks? And we will adjourn to, or move to the closed session and adjourn from there.
Mayor?
Oh, we need a vote. We have to roll call.
We need a motion. Mayor, I move to closed session for the reasons stated on the agenda and to adjourn from there.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion of the motion. Let's vote.
Councilmember Whitelock?
Yes.
Councilmember Anderson?
Yes.
Councilmember McConaughey?
Aye.
Councilmember Jacob?
Yes.
Councilmember Lamb?
Yes.
Mayor Whiting?
Yes.
Councilmember Burton?
Yes.
Vote passes 7 in favor.